The following podcast is brought to you by CDKOffers.com. Use offer code DIESHRINK for 3% off everything on the website and Broken Silicon for 25% off all Windows codes. All right, on with the show. And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and I am joined today, as I am for every news episode, by my co-host,
Dan.
How you doing, Dan?
Pretty good, I guess. Got to go remotely to a fun conference in jolly old England today, Tom, so...
All right, go remotely, so you did not
so
go.
I watched a bunch of speeches.
Yeah. Which, I mean, as of this recording, about a week after this comes out, it will be hot chips. I will be going to my office to watch the press conferences for another year in a row. Unfortunately, can't go in person. It's funny. It's funny, actually, when I signed up for the hot chips tickets, they actually had like a little survey that was like, oh, next year, do you want this to be in person? And even though it will cost more. And I'm like, yes. Yeah, that's the point, by the way. It's like, it should cost way less to watch it because I'm not meeting people in person.
That's kind of half the point of going to a conference, yeah.
I mean, for me, it's mostly the point. I went there a few years ago as a proxy for someone that I kind of would advise every now and then when I started to blow up a little bit. And I can tell you, like, I mean, let's put it this way. When I went there in 2019, there were, so I guess 2 years ago, not a few, there were like 3 or 4 live streams I did and like 3 videos I did after I got back. That's from, meeting Raja Koduri and Jim Keller, people at ARM, AMD in person there, seeing Lisa Su in person and all these other people. I mean, seeing the Cerberus wafer scale chip in person, like meeting these people and having drinks with them, all of that creativity. I mean, people that I don't even remember the names of that I met, and they're just like, oh, I build chips for self-driving cars for this one little thing in Israel. Like, interesting people like that. I made like 5 or 6 videos off of that. And I think I made like 1 or 2 from the hot chips last year. I think that tells you that I think you gain far more from it being in person.
Yeah, that's definitely true. There's just so much more to be gained when you're there in person. And if only would have been fun to go to a British conference. But that is neither here nor there because I cannot go this year.
Yeah. I'm glad I got to go to the Carolina Games Summit in Raleigh, North Carolina, though. Got a couple pieces of content out of that. I still haven't had time to put out all of the follow-up emails and, from the cards and the contacts I made there. A lot of game developers. It's funny how when I was there, Dan, I was basically the same person I was when I worked at my previous automotive job of like going to places, meeting people, having dinner with people, giving them my card, following up with them after the conference to establish, like other things, longer term relationships that benefit both of us. It's like, I got to schmooze again, Dan.
As one of our friends jokingly said, your job title was you were a schmoozer.
A schmoozer in the automotive industry, yes. You know what, though? I did a lot with like bomb kits, which has helped me with these leaks and the discussions with graphics cards now. There's a lot of like math and stuff and tracking data I had to do, though, Dan. I'll have you know. I was a dorky schmoozer.
I'm aware. I know.
Yeah. All that is to say, I'm glad we're starting to travel some, although it is unfortunate that there's still issues, shall we say, out there causing it so we cannot travel as much as we'd want to. But let us get into the opening reader mails. We have the Hollow Knight writes in and says, do you like any product, Tom? You're an Nvidia fanboy. Wait, AMD fanboy. Wait, Nvidia hater. Sorry, AMD hater now? Intel fanboy or hater? Or, do you just hate? It seems like everyone accused you of being a fanboy before, but now you're just hating everything. Anyways, keep up the great work. I'll be honest, and you'll see this when we start talking about the 6600 XT later. I like the technology of the 6600 XT. I like the technology of a lot of Intel and Nvidia products, even to this day. I just don't like
the
what
prices?
It takes to buy them right now. Yeah, and those are two different things. So, yeah, I mean, I think people would be good to remember that even when Intel is at its lowest, which I would argue is kind of right now, maybe 6 months ago is their lowest in terms of like perceived competitiveness with AMD, there were still a lot of products that I feel like I was the only one saying they were impressive. In fact, over the weekend, me and Ian Cuttress on Twitter were like pointing out to people, everyone makes fun of Ice Lake X. Ice Lake X sales are just going to affect more people than all of AMD's market share combined. Like, as much as you guys shit on Intel, you do not seem to understand how big of a deal Intel still is and how big of a deal it is that though they're behind AMD, they just massively increased their performance in server. It's not caught up, but the fact that it's not a third as good anymore is actually might affect more people's lives than AMD launching something new.
Well, yeah, and to jump the gun once again, if you look at the Intel versus AMD products, even though AMD is winning the perception war right now, Intel's still pretty prominent in the market, to say the least.
Yeah, I'd say, and that was part of what I pointed out as well, is that it was in a response. I don't remember who, and I don't really care. It's not like someone on Twitter was saying, "Oh, AMD like just killed Intel with Zen 3," and I'm like, first of all, they haven't killed them, and second of all, they took 3 generations of superior products, I would argue, which everyone wants to argue with me about this. I think Zen Plus was more impressive than Coffee Lake in terms of how much it costs to produce and its efficiency. I mean, the fact that they had an inferior node and were almost up to the performance of a 9900K and selling it for half the price effectively, it's like, I think AMD overall won that. Unless, again, it's like you think Nvidia won when they had like a $650 GTX 280 versus like a $400 HD 4870 that's 80% the performance. It's like, I know which one impresses me more, the one with half to a third the die size and half the power usage for almost the same performance. AMD didn't just wipe out Intel with Zen 3. It took 3 generations of, I think, superior performance for them to even start to have this huge market share. And it's still a third of Intel's.
Yeah, and that's why AMD needs to keep maintaining their quality over Intel if they want to actually become like a 50-50 market, which I think I wouldn't bet on that happening yet. But
I mean, I think they kind of are in really
in some
enthusiast
markets, maybe,
do-it-yourself, but that not in laptop or anything, the ones that matter for real revenue. And the overall point I was making with that as well is when we look at Ampere's record sales versus RDNA 2, it's not because AMD's not selling every RDNA 2. It's just NVIDIA's got, you buy wafer capacity ahead of time, and NVIDIA was able to just bet ahead of time that they'd sell more cards. And they are, and from what I hear from distributors, like I just mentioned at the Carolina Games Summit, they're like, yeah, the unfortunate thing is that people are willing to buy Radeon now, but if 2 cards are marked up by 50%, there's a lot less people willing to pay 50% more for the AMD card, fair or not. And that, if it took AMD 3 generations to be perceived as ahead of Intel in technology, even if I think they were a long time ago, I think it's going to take RDNA 4 when everyone realizes they're ahead of NVIDIA. Because I would compare RDNA 2 to Zen Plus right now, where it's arguably caught up, but it's not like they have the performance crown, and there's still a lot of people that would swear by Intel. We'll have to see if RDNA 3 is a Zen 2 moment, because I think it could be. But even then, RDNA 2 didn't take a bunch of market share. It's going to take years for Radeon to catch up, just like it did Ryzen.
I wonder if AMD will be able to capitalize off of RDNA 3 sooner, just given that their cache has already increased a lot because of Zen 3. I mean, not Zen 3, because of Zen overall. Where I wouldn't be surprised if perceptions on their GPUs changed slightly quicker than their CPU perceptions changed.
Yeah. Anyways, though, let us get into corrections and omissions. Mitch Kid writes in, and he says, in Die Shrink 51, you forgot to mention a key gaming portable. So this is a Die Shrink for patrons where we spent time like looking through the history of portables, gaming devices, basically from Game Boy to DS, and I think the next one, because we don't want to do all portable gaming in one episode, probably like 3 episodes. Probably want to do, I think we've decided Game Boy to DS, 3DS through Switch, and then kind of now is probably what we'll end up doing. But he says, you forgot about the TI-83 calculator. I think I spent more time on that than on the Game Boy, even though the graphics were bad. It made class bearable. I never gamed on my TI-83. I don't think. Did I install a game on that? I think I might have out of novelty, just I was curious.
I coded on my TI-83 when I was bored, but I never played.
Coded what?
Oh, I don't even remember. I would just try to think of random crap I could code and see if I could figure out how to do it. I tried to make like a what would base 10 to binary converter one time when I was bored.
I think I just vomited nerd. I mean, yeah, and although it's not to say I'm not nerdy, I never gamed on my TI-83 because I just insisted on completely paying attention in class. I just always wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. But yeah, I know a lot of my friends gamed on the TI-83 a lot, though. Like a lot. Like, yeah, our friend Krishna, he was always game. Oh, you know what Krishna would do, Dan? I thought it was hilarious. He would like take his science book, and this was AP Physics, and he just put the book up, stand it up, so it was almost like a wall on his desk, and then he'd just read a book behind it. So the teacher technically couldn't see him reading the book. That was in Dr. Scott's class, just so you know, Dan. Okay. And I was just like, I looked at him like, he knows you're reading, I said to him. And he's like, yeah, but he can't see it, so the illusion's there. And technically the teacher never got mad at him. If he technically couldn't see him reading the book, he's like, whatever.
And with my memory of Dr. Scott, that was the weird logic he operated under, so that holds.
Pretty much. Yeah, I remember he's like, can you guys please throw trash in the trash can? Don't throw it. Walk 5 feet and actually throw it away, please. And I was like, I just feel like where you put the trash can, it'd be more efficient if it was here. And he said, well, why don't we just tape little trash cans to our chest if you're that lazy, Tom? And that ended that conversation. I liked Dr. Scott, but that's a blast from the past. Hopefully those anecdotes are found funny by a lot of people here. We have another correction from Big Jeff B. He says, hey, Tom and Dan, when you were talking about the next Switch and Broken Silicon 112, you brought up that Nintendo needed to make money on the Switch after a rough patch with the Wii U. Yeah, and the people forget the 3DS, though it became successful, was really
shaky at first.
It was a shaky launch and certainly not as profitable as the DS. So people forget that. Yeah, I mean, it looked kind of like they went from having the Wii and the DS at the same time to the Wii U and the 3DS. Their company's profits were just way down, especially in comparison to when Sony was kind of starting to fire on all cylinders leading into the PS4 launch. Yeah. But so I just want to be clear, though, it's not just the Wii U. Like, and they were behind on like online revenue. There's a lot of issues they were having at the time, But to continue his question, he goes, that is true. However, generally Nintendo always uses lower spec hardware to make sure they are at least breaking even on their hardware at the start of a generation. The Wii itself is an example of this, as parents show it was originally set as an add-on for the GameCube. Also, Wii's at the start had the perfect backwards compatibility with the GameCube because it basically used the same SoC. The Wii U was the exception to that rule because of the gamepad controller that every Wii U came with, and they were confident they would do well with the success of the Wii prior. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I feel like going into the Wii U launch, they slowly realized this isn't going to do as well, though. People forget that was when anytime there's a new anything, everyone acts like it's going to take over everything because it doubles market share every year. It's like when smartphones came out, there's not going to be console or PC gaming. And then when tablets came out, they're like, no one's going to game on consoles or PC anymore. And Now streaming is going to kill PC gaming again, Dan. Oh my God, here it comes. Just like smartphones and just like consoles are going to kill PC, except it's not, guys. Because I feel like when you guys were talking about the next SoC Nintendo, you're falling into the trap that Nintendo did with the Wii U. Nintendo has expressed the goal of breaking even at worst when starting a new gen in terms of hardware. With that in mind, I think fans need to tone down their expectations a bit with the next Switch SoC. I believe unless Nvidia gave them a sweetheart deal on Lovelace SoC, Nintendo would use the gen before, or even one before that in the next Switch. Again, so I would recommend, Big Jeff, if you haven't watched it, that you watch my Lovelace Switch leak, because to me, the arguments you're making sound like things that I directly address. So if you think they're going to use 2 generations older, you think they're just going to keep making Pascal in 2023, Jeff? Because I don't. They can't.
Yeah, and I think you even alluded to an extent, or alluded to that to an extent. Nvidia could potentially offer some type of a quote unquote sweetheart deal if they wanted to, just so they aren't producing Pascal chips in the year 2028 or something.
I mean, so yeah, number one, I almost think they have to use a later SoC. Again, even Volta, it's like, what? When we're on 5 nanometer or 3 nanometer GPUs, you really think they're going to be making 12 nanometer Volta chips? I don't think so, my friend. I think that would actually cost them more money than using a newer architecture. And therefore, yes, I do think they would give them a good deal on the Lovelace SoC. The final thing I want to bring up, though, is I don't think anyone gets this. Those goddamn switches cost $50 to make. So when you say ridiculous things like, oh, Nintendo has to sell their stuff at a profit, buddy, trust me, they are, and more so. The Switch launched at absurd profit margins for a console. It wasn't like they were profiting there's like $300 for a 720p LCD, like 3-hour battery life?
It wouldn't surprise me especially with the OLED model that's coming out, the screen is the most expensive part of that thing.
Oh, for sure.
The old Switch, I doubt that screen is very expensive anymore.
I mean, it's got like 3 gigs of RAM, so that's not even $20. It's probably like $10, and it's old RAM. Again, it might almost be more expensive because it's older RAM. It's like $10 for the RAM, probably. And honestly, these screens don't cost as much as people think.
Yeah.
It's a 720p OLED screen. It's probably from some old tablet that now they're using it for. OLED has been the Vita. I think the Vita was 540p.
Okay, so they sold that for what, $250 when that came out, right? Like,
yes, guys, no, and I want to be clear. I'm not saying the Switch cost $50 to make when it came out with its stock. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying it probably had a $50 profit on that as well. That they could have used Pascal or Volta back then and still probably made a small profit on it. Like they wanted to make a lot of profit on it, from what I can tell, and they're making crazy profit margins on this thing now. I don't know how much it costs to make the new OLED Switch, but I would guess it's like $150 at most. They're selling it for $350, and then the Switch Portable is probably like $50 to $100 to make. All of this is to say that do I think they can make a $300 console with a Lovelace APU? Yes, easily. I do.
Yeah,
it's in 2023. We're forgetting that, like, if this is on 8 nanometer by then with Ampere, it's not going to be expensive at all. And if it's even on 5 nanometer for Lovelace, again, we're not saying it's coming out today. We're saying in like a year or more. I don't think it's going to be that expensive to make it for $300.
I'm assuming it's not going to be coming out with like a 80SM version.
No, I mean, the top Orin sounds, I guess we don't technically know if this is true, but it seems like top Orin for now is stated to have 2048 CUDA cores by NVIDIA, which isn't a small amount.
Yeah.
But the final thing I would say is the idea that Nintendo never makes strong consoles is also just wrong. Nintendo 64 is really powerful.
And the GameCube was pretty strong for its time, too.
For the price, yeah. It was decent. So, I don't know. I thanks for the question, but just consider that it's like I didn't miss these points. I directly addressed them in my leak. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Although, again, if I'm wrong, it's like, it's not because they couldn't have done it. Like, right now, NVIDIA, if Nintendo had some custom Volta APU in the Switch, they probably still could have made a very slight profit at like $300 at launch. I just want to be very clear about that. That there's room for them to both be more aggressive with specs and make money on the device. And now that Nvidia knows Nintendo's successful, I think they could give them a sweetheart deal. Again, from the Nvidia's perspective in 2016 and 2017, they were like, oh no, we want to get into self-driving, and the Wii U sold like crap. And they might even look at the Switch as a Wii U 2.0. So from Nvidia's perspective, they were like, we don't even know if this is going to sell 10 million units, Nintendo. So we'll give you a slightly different version of the standard Maxwell SoC, but that's it. We're not custom designing anything. Now I think they would.
Yeah, because as far as they know, and I think the Switch 2, I don't see why it wouldn't be as successful as the first
I
Switch.
agree.
I'm sure they're now thinking, oh, this will probably sell at least close to 100 million.
Yeah. Which, let us move on, though, and get into the first story here. Story number 1, RX 6600 XT reviewed and released. Reviewers cry, gamers buy. That's what I named it. Got a little write-up here. This week, the PC gaming community saw the reviewing and release of AMD's quote-unquote low-end RX 6600 XT. In short and in summary, the card did launch for $379, and it was actually in stock with a notable amount of its volume at MSRP as well. Yes, most AIB models cost more, but not as much more, in this writer's opinion, as we have typically seen happen with most releases this year. I mean, most of them seem below $500. It didn't. Yes, I know there's some that are more than that, but I know a lot of people that got one for MSRP, guys. And in fact, I woke up and then checked like 4 or 5 hours after the 6600 XT launched, and there were like more than a few in stock at the Micro Center I used to shop at in Illinois. In stock when I checked.
I guess we'll see what that ends up meaning.
They're sold out now.
Obviously, I would have. You're not a genius if you guess that they sell out in the first 24 hours or something. But I wonder what that will end up meaning is ultimately like how well will this sell? Or was there did this sell super well and they had a good stock? Or was it a bit underwhelming now? I guess maybe you know something about the sales figures more, but...
Well, let me continue we'll talk about that in a second, but it's selling, it's just there's this lag time between, honestly, from distributors I talked to overseas as well, they're like, gamers just don't expect things to be in stock anymore, so they actually sat there for a half a day, and they were like, what? Oh, they're actually there at MSRP, and then gamers just went and got them the next day. And I talked to... Theo, who I interviewed on the last Broken Silicon, or Ted as well, from Silver Knights, and he said, oh no, that's very common. Like, we will even get drops of 3070s, and then no one shows up the first hour or two because people are like, yeah, sure. And then they're like, oh no, they're really there. Then they show up the next day. But continuing the write-up though, the performance itself of the 6600 XT was honestly fairly impressive if you remove the price. Number 1, in 1080p, this 237 millimeter squared card is 9% behind the 392 millimeter squared 3060 Ti and 10% ahead of the 276 millimeter squared 3060. Second point, in fact, some games this card matched a 3070 in 1080p. Although, to be fair, in 1440p, it narrowly beats the 3060 and ties the 5700 XT. And in 4K, it tied the 5700. However, this card managed to pull around 40 watts less, it seemed, in real-world usage than the 3060, and even less than the notably weaker previous-gen RX 5600 XT. And that was made on the same node, guys, even if it was cut down. Technologically, then, the 6600 XT is an insanely efficient card that offers incredible performance for its die size. Yet, reviewers lambasted the card, saying it cost too much and was silly for only having 8 PCIe lanes, which I'm not saying they're necessarily entirely wrong there, but in response to these overwhelmingly negative reviews, gamers bought all of them up within a day, which is impressive given the fact that this launch was bigger than the previous RDNA 2 launches. So gamers do not agree with reviewers, not in a meaningful way. And that's probably because gamers are aware by now that Nvidia's MSRPs are fake. On average, the 3060 is selling for 20 to 30% more on the street, and this was actually something Hardware Unboxed noted in their review, saying that if this stuck to be true for a while, they could see why this MSRP was chosen, and this could actually be the best launch of the year. And Moore's Law is Dead wonders when other reviewers will wake up to the reality of what's going on with actual pricing between cards. One could argue, unfortunately, this was the best GPU launch of 2021 so far, but that's because this year just sucked in general for getting a graphics card. Yeah, I also want to give a shout out to Gamers Nexus, who I like at the end of his video summarized, like, honestly, none of these cards make sense to get unless you need it if it's for work. If you have a workflow and it's costing you money, then of course you should buy this card. And this might be the best choice for a lot of people. But otherwise, if you don't actually need a new card, this is the worst year to get a card. And I felt like Steve at Gamers Nexus shied away from directly attacking the card because he's like, it's just so hard to attack it when the alternative is a $700 2070 on eBay that's used. But yeah, what did you think of the reviews?
Well, and that's something that we said. Steve from Gamers Nexus is his entire review that he has nothing negative to say about the card itself. And I think there is something to be said that, and this has been a trend for a while, like build quality for cards has been going up over time for the past decade, I feel like. And cards in general, their quality is higher. Like there's nothing objective to say about the 6600 XT to say it's a bad card. It's a really good 1080p graphics card. It's kind of funny how fast it falls once you get to 1440p and 4K, but
I would say it's okay 1440p, actually. It's just not as impressive. But if you take into account efficiency, it's actually still impressive.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying head to head, how fast it falls to like the 3060 once you get to 1440p and 4K.
Yeah, it almost ties it.
Yeah, it's crazy how much better it performs in 1080p versus the 3060 than in 1440p or 4K. But a lot of people are still gaming in 1080p. I think most people are probably still gaming in 1080p.
Depends what you mean by most people. I mean, worldwide for sure.
It's a good 1080p card at a bad price. Every card's at a bad price, though, so don't buy it unless you need to get it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the interesting thing, though, about honestly, its performance is, I would argue, pretty competitive. And again, I'm not saying I think it should cost this much, but I don't think any of these cards should cost this much. It's all relative. I just want to point out that in my 3060 review, I found it completely worthless in 4K, unfortunately, which is hilarious to me because it didn't really beat a highly overclocked Vega. And in a lot of games, it just fell apart in ray tracing, unlike the 3070, which sometimes works as a decent ray tracing card, depending on how optimized the game is and depending on if the game has good DLSS 2.0. So if the 3060 is never really usable in 4K except for older games, then I don't know what advantage it really has because, I mean, in older games, the 6600 XT is honestly like 3, 4, 5% weaker in 4K. So it's like they're both going to do well. If the 3060 is doable in 4K, I don't think the 6600 XT is bad. And in 1440p, at least at a hardware unboxed, it edged out the 3060. So I just think it's a better card and it costs less. I don't know what you want. Costs less than the competition, guys. It's not, I don't know.
And if the 3060 can't perform well in 4K, it's almost as if you're paying for 6 gigabytes of RAM that won't be leveraged by the card. So it's almost like, why does this graphics card have this in it? But
which is funny because I understood why they did it early on. It was like in deciding between trying to make a $250 6 gigabyte. Because again, as everyone knows, they originally wanted like a $300 to $350 6 gigabyte card for maximum profits, basically giving you nothing. But they saw RDNA 2 and they're like, we need to beef up some of our lineup. So we either make it a $250 6 gigabyte card, or we make it, because again, they thought it would be competing with like a $250 6600 XT and a $350 6700 non-XT. And so they beefed it up to 12 gigabytes, so just to pass on $30 of RAM, but now RAM's 2 to 3 times the cost it used to be. And it's like, yeah, I guess they probably should have just done like a $300 6 gigabyte card. And I continue to think that they should introduce a 6 gigabyte $320 version. Like the MSRP is $20 less, but in practice, it'll end up being $50 to $100 less on the street. And therefore cheaper than the 600 XT. I think that's what Nvidia just needs to do and just admit you screwed up.
Yeah. Or the other thing to mention is its power consumption. I mean, if you compare it to the 5600 XT, it uses the same amount of power and gets 30% more performance. That's a pretty good uplift for power frames per watt, I should say.
There's that claimed efficiency increase with RDNA too. I'm like, this card kind of proves it. Like, here you go.
And it's a little funny how the card it's replacing, it uses the exact same amount of energy as the card it's replacing, but just delivers 30% more performance.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't know. I'm looking at the script here. I don't have much else to say because we should just directly get into the second story at this point. But I only really, I'm going to be honest, everyone, watched the Gamers Nexus and the Hardware Unboxed review on this one. But I did see quotes from other reviews where they're just like, worst card ever made. And I'm just like, guys, go to Micro Center. It costs $100 less than the 3060 in real life. Your reviews don't make sense anymore if you don't acknowledge that.
Or go to Newegg and look at the 3060. I guess it's available on Newegg if you want to pay $900 for it or something crazy.
Yeah, and so, and let's get into why though. Let's move on then to story number 2. RX 6600 XT BOM costs below MSRP. AIBs can profit around $380 for this card, and this was part of my analysis video where I guys, even when I'm not technically doing outwardly videos that look like leaks, having these insider sources allows me to have way more informed opinions on what's going on. And I can just tell you guys that right now, some distributors are buying directly from AIBs the cheapest 3060s they can because they don't want to sell expensive 3060s. And the cheapest they can get them for from an AIB with the AIBs, whatever, 20-30% cut is like $380. And not even that, like some AIB is the cheapest model is like a 10-20% cut on the 3060 right now. Yeah, they're getting it for like $380 to $400 something, like $400. So I'm just telling you, when you buy from some of these distributors and they're like, why is this 3060 $420? Because they're not making much more than 5 to 10% on these cards, guys. Whereas the 6600 XT is being supplied in high numbers, and the $380 models have a profit on them. They're not being sold at a loss, and they're not token deliveries. In fact, one of my distributor contacts overseas told me, holy crap, this is the next day after I already put out the video, not only did we receive way more cards at launch than we expected, we have even more coming in a week. So they're continuing to supply them. And a lot of them, not all of them, most of them are not, because AIBs are focusing on high-end versions because they can sell them right now. But a lot of them are around the MSRP, like a fourth of the stock, not like 5% like Ampere. This is actually really impressive. And some of the system integrators I've talked to said, hey, look, if we can actually get these things from AIBs for at or below MSRP and then put them in our systems, we're just going to stop carrying the 3060, like straight up, because we hate that card. It makes everything above it look weird, and we'd rather just put 3060 Ti's in mid-range builds and this in low-end builds.
Well, and if you can't turn over as a system integrator or like a Micro Center type store, if you can't turn over your stock quickly, you're going to be losing money on it. Like, if a 3060 sits in your store for 2 months, well, hell, it might have dropped in price by then, and now you're selling a card have to sell a card for what, like, I don't know, I'm making up a number, $450 or $350 that you bought for $400 because you just need to get it the hell out of your store.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just noticing here that I didn't even read the write-up I wrote for this story, but I think I already covered everything in it. I mean, I'm trying to think of what else there is to say on this story specifically. I really want to emphasize it that, and this kind of went under the radar for my analysis video of the 6600 XT. Really, AMD has hundreds of thousands of units are being delivered right now of this card, more than they did with the original Navi 21 stock. And they're continuing to supply them. That AMD really is making a lot of these, and they really can profit at the MSRP. That's not a flashy title, I guess, for WCCF Tech, but that's an important point, that the 3060 is being produced now, and it should flood the market within a week of this podcast coming out. It's actually already, I have some distributors saying they've already received more 3060s than they've received in the previous 3 months combined already in August, which is technically a little misleading because they've been receiving almost no 3060s for 3 months, if literally none at some locations, by the way, I'm told. Literally none, guys. And it's because Nvidia doesn't want to supply a card that makes absolutely no sense with GDR6 costs right now. But Nvidia is going to flood the market with overpriced 3060s and then they'll probably stop making a lot of them because they just want to keep putting those in laptops and sending 3070s that have huge margins on them. I really think the 6600 XT has a huge opening here for very real reasons that it can be made. It actually can be made and sold with a profit margin at its MSRP. They actually can make a lot of them. I just think this is an important point.
Yeah, and, to reference now Steve Walton's review of the 6600 XT with the street price. So the 3060 Ti and 3060 are both lower cost per frame according to their MSRPs. But if you look at the street prices, they looks about 40 to 50% more cost per frame than the 6600 XT. And the 6600 XT, according to its street price now, we'll see. Maybe it will increase. Its street price will increase over time. I wouldn't be surprised. But as it stands right now, it's the lowest cost per frame card pretty much out there right now. And that includes previous gen cards. So
and again, in the write-up that I skipped, I will read this part. And I want to be very clear on why that is. It has the 3060 is a bigger die. The 3060 uses more energy. There is a shortage of power components. The 6600 XT requires like a lot cheaper components for its power delivery and its cooling, and it has 4 gigabytes less RAM. There are multiple factors why the 3060 will probably never have a street price lower on average. There will always be token drops, of course, as explained in the Ultimate Play article, but it's never going to be consistently below it.
Yeah, and we'll see how prices shake up over the next couple weeks and how frequent drops are. But most 6600 XTs on like Newegg are, or at least half, I think, seem to be in like the $380 to $420 range at this point. So hopefully that holds. Hopefully that somehow brings prices down because other stuff just stops selling, although that's probably a bit of wishful thinking. But, as it stands, the MSRP is, frankly, it's shit for the 6600 XT, but it's...
Any other generation, it'd be like, what's going on?
But yeah, it's the best shit MSRP we've got.
Yes, and I guess what I will say then is I've still seen a lot of comments, of course, people going, why would I buy this card that's almost as much as a $400 PS5 that's stronger and it's an entire system? And I would say, I don't have a good answer for you guys. Kind of what Gamers Nexus said, frankly. I don't have a good answer for you. If you're buying a 6600 XT, I hope it's because you're using it for non-gaming tasks, which you do with your 6700 XT. I certainly do with my 3070. So it's kind of like a completely different discussion for me. I didn't get the Radeon 7 for gaming, guys. I got it for editing, and also it was my favorite color, and it looked really cool, let's be honest. But that's what this is. This is a hobby, but it becomes really silly when you're starting to sell an entire console's price for a card that's weaker than the consoles. And I'm not going to get into a debate on if it's weaker. It is, guys. Go on.
And from my perspective, why would you buy this instead of a PS5? I mean, I bought a PS5 before I bought a new graphics card, and I only bought a new graphics card because if you can get it for the right price, there's no reason to not get it if you can sell your old card.
Which you could, and I could with my Radeon 7.
Yeah, so I would say if you ask why would I get this over a $400 PS5, I would say I don't know why you would.
But that does bring up one more important point here I want to say. If you have a Vega 56, heck, if you have a Polaris card, I mean, guys, this is a good time to sell your card if you can get a better one. I would say, look on it, though. If you can get one of these for $380 at your local Micro Center on BestBuy.com, Newegg, if you can get in a Newegg Shuffle and you happen to get one of these for $380, I think try to. And it's not the best card, but it will use less energy than any of your old cards. It is capable of ray tracing. Some old cards were not, unless you have Turing. So, or at least not the new standard of how they do ray tracing. You would argue, actually, they could have done ray tracing sometimes. But anyways, I would just say that, and this is where we get into why these are all selling. Yeah, I mean, look, man, if you got a 580 that you can sell on eBay for 300, would I get this for would I pay $180 to like get a 50% to double performance boost and cut my energy down? I would, and
Yeah.
so don't forget that though, if you're shopping, that like, again, I just said that in my analysis video. This is kind of competitive, it's on average stronger than a 5700 XT while giving you ray tracing capabilities and using substantially less energy for less money than the 5700 XT launched at. It's a improvement, and it actually is at MSRP. It's just way below what our hopes and dreams were, but there's just so many reasons you might buy this, and that's why it's selling out. And I don't know, just don't miss those other reasons though. Don't just go, I'm going to sit with my 2060. Well, if you can sell that 2060 for 300, 400, 500 bucks right now, consider trying. Get this first. Don't sell it, then buy this. Get this first, because I think pricing could be all over the place until Q2 next year. But just don't miss that.
Yeah.
All right. The Hollow Knight writes in and says, how does Nvidia produce more cards than AMD almost, if not all generations, even when their cards are cheaper to make and have more VRAM? For this gen, I think it was because of how spread out AMD is related products on N7 and N6 consoles, Zen 2 and 3, RDNA 1 and 2. Will this change for RDNA 3, Zen 4 on Zen 5? Basically, will AMD be able to come anywhere close to NVIDIA's GPU output next gen? It's hard to say for sure. It sounds like NVIDIA is going to launch Lovelace possibly in the mid-range to low-end first as like an early run like they did with Maxwell at the 750 Ti. So we'll see what that really means. But I just wouldn't be surprised if NVIDIA makes a lot of newer cards on TSMC or Samsung's 5nm again next year, but then continues to maybe make, GA106 as the 4050 Ti or something, or even GA104. Let's be honest. Yeah. That's what I would do, and just clock it lower, because GA104 at respectable speeds can be like crazy efficient. The A4000 is a 140 watt card. There's no reason they couldn't just rebrand GA104 as a 4050 Ti at lower clocks, and give you something that's about the performance of a 3060 Ti that uses 150 watts. I don't know why they couldn't do that. And if they do, they'll have a ton of capacity. But for previous generations, guys, you buy up capacity ahead of time. So if NVIDIA is planning ahead, that's why they would have so much capacity. I mean, and Samsung's like, how much money they're making selling these? Samsung's like, take it all. Take all the 8nm capacity, man. And
I don't think it's misguided to say this, but I mean, NVIDIA does still have a lot more money to work with than AMD.
I think they have, a bigger market cap than Intel. Nvidia is flush with cash. Good. Correct me.
Let me look that up. I wouldn't be completely shocked, I guess, but I'm a little surprised to hear that.
So Nvidia has all this money. They buy capacity ahead of time. RDNA 2 surprised people. And frankly, even from AMD's perspective, my understanding is they had a big production of RDNA 2 at first, and it sold out like instantly. And also but then they just prioritized Zen 3 because 79mm squared chiplets are being sold. 2 of those. So like what? What are we talking? Like 160mm squared of 7nm? You're putting that in an $800 5950X instead of less than one 6600 XT in wafer capacity? That's why they're prioritizing Zen 3. RDNA 3 is going to have a lot more performance and be able to be sold for even more money, so that might change. And I want to be clear, though, RDNA 2 is supposedly like the most profitable gen they've ever had in graphics by a huge margin. So it's not like it's a bad choice to sell it. It's just NVIDIA buys up, you buy up capacity ahead of time. NVIDIA could plan ahead better. NVIDIA's supply chains are very good, and AMD has reasons to not prioritize graphics right now.
And NVIDIA does have double the market cap of Intel.
That's what I thought.
Confuses me how any economy or business works, considering Intel also has 7 times the revenue, but whatever.
Timo writes in, what would NVIDIA do if the 6600 XT became a much greater success than, and I mean in both terms of supply and performance, how many people were buying the large supply up quickly? Would NVIDIA just do nothing and rely on fanboys not switching to Red Team? Or quickly produce more 3060s and 1050s to retail? Little confused by how you worded your question, Timo, but which I think I even tried to fix it up, but I could have done a better job even with that. Anyways, let's just put it this way. If the 6600 XT is a huge success and AMD actually just starts surprisingly, instead of, doing what they would normally do, which is like 50 to 150,000 cards a quarter per segment, like if they actually just started doing like 500,000 somehow, what would Nvidia do? I mean, I think it would be maybe nothing. I don't know that they'd care because they're still selling so many cards and they're making so much money. And at most, I would just introduce a $320 6GB 3060. And again, people would go, what? A 6GB for only $20 less MSRP? Yeah, but MSRP is fake. So it's really going to be like a $350 to $380 card, and it'll sell. That's all I would do. I don't. If I was Nvidia, I don't know if I would bother selling the 3060 Ti's because I don't think they need to. The 3070 is already cut down. There's a 3070 laptop edition that's more cut down than the 3070. I hear GA104 has excellent yields. I honestly don't. I've already talked about this in my 3060 review. The segmentation around that area makes no sense. If I was Nvidia, I'd just make a bunch of 3070s and introduce a 6GB 3060. I wouldn't even bother with the 3060 Ti.
Yeah, I don't know the point of the 3060 Ti. That might
From
be
a
the
business
dumbest
perspective.
Yeah.
Dan, they thought RDNA 2 was going to be competitive, and I don't know. They should have seen the shortages coming, though, which they did. They even said they saw it coming. And they're like, shortages are coming, and yet they still make this $400 card that's never going to be that's 90% the performance of a 3070. Like, why? People will just buy a 3070. Hollow Knight writes him, if RDNA 2 was significantly stronger than Ampere, would Nvidia have launched some GA100 or a TSMC GA102 gaming card? What causes GDR6X to use so much energy? Is it the chip itself, the controller, or something else? Would the cooling issues for the 3090 be worse if Micron had... he just has an even higher gigabit per second, an insane number. Like he's basically saying if they had like 30 gigabits somehow, GDR6X, would it be like a 500 watt card? The answer is probably yes, by the way. I don't even think it could run it that fast, so the memory controller probably couldn't take it. Like they had to like redesign the 290X's memory controller a little for the 390X, I was told, to have it have at stock like 20-30% more bandwidth. So it wasn't exactly a rebrand. 390X was actually slightly updated revision.
390X is a pretty cute card.
It's pretty cute. But to answer these questions in order, look, it was set in stone. Whatever they were going to do with Ampere was going to be 8 nanometer by the beginning of 2020, and there wasn't some other big card. I heard about a GA101, but I was actually told it was a half GA100, that is to say, no video output still. It's all about the tensor performance. So I don't think they would have likely had much else. I wonder if they would have done a tweak to that card and made a new die as quickly as possible so they could have something out by early this year. Like, I wonder if they would have accelerated a paper launch of like a Titan Lovelace, kind of like Titan Volta. That's what I wonder. But
because GA100 is kind of almost a different architecture than
kind of
Ampere, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of is in a way. I mean, it is from the perspective of it's an entirely different die with a different organization for a lot of its parts, but components of the die. So I don't know. I mean, I think all NVIDIA could have done is lose. I think there's a reason they named it the 3090 and not the Titan, because they thought they could lose. But I would argue they kind of did overall in performance and especially efficiency, but I mean, they would have just lost. I mean, like, it is what it is, right? I think they would have accelerated a Titan Lovelace is what they would have done.
Yeah, probably. Or I don't even know if that would be feasible to launch a Halo product that has like whatever 84 SMs would have for CUDA cores. But I don't know if that would have been feasible for them to release that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if they could have done some paper launch on it early with Lovelace. But so they could say they're not losing. But yeah, that's why it was called the 3090. And to not ramble on too much more, I mean, yeah, GDR6X, guys, it's like public why it sucks. Like, go look at Micron's own slides. And this was a discussion in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, which you get access to if you support us on Patreon. There was a whole discussion about GDR6X where I shared a graph. I'm like, look, Micron themselves says 15% more efficient for bandwidth. So they're saying as you add more bandwidth, it still adds a lot more power, but it's 15% better. That's not good. Like HBM doubles bandwidth at lower energy, And that's why it's worth using. GDR6X is and that's just their own benchmarks. Like, that's not a third-party thing. And they even say, but other things can have higher costs as well. So for all we know, that's GDR6X is 15% more efficient at the same speeds as GDR6. It's like basically not more efficient than GDR6. And so think about it. So if you're using which they make 21 gigabit per second. If you're using 21 gigabit per second memory instead of 14, it's going to use 50% more energy probably, at least, depending on how much they've cherry-picked. And there's a reason the 3090 doesn't even clock its memory that high at stock. It's because we know that like half of the power consumption of some recent cards has been the memory controller with GDR5 or GDR6. So you're just adding like 100 watts there or 50 watts, just flat out. And if you look at A6000, apples to apples, GDR6, GDR6X, oh, look at that. It uses like that much less energy to the bandwidth difference.
It's almost like you can glean this information from looking at the graphs or something.
Yeah, and so it's like GDR6X just isn't very good. I mean, and it's public why it's not. Mm-hmm. Tick Dickler writes in, "Hey guys, hope you're taking it easy. I'm not, but I'm living. I could be wrong, but with how substrate supply is, and now GDR6 costs doubling, for the first time ever, consoles this holiday season seem like they're going to be even more difficult to get than the one they were released during. And this upcoming age of an almost exclusively digital sales, how much is it worth it to both Microsoft and Sony to get a console into the hands of a gamer? We're getting back to $200 losses per unit. Excited for another PS360 gen, so maybe I'm projecting anyways. Thanks." Well, let's just move on to the next story to answer Tick Dickler's question here. We've already kind of talked about why some people may just want to consider getting a console if they don't need to use keyboard and mouse, and I think the Xbox already supports it. But anyways, story number 3. Nvidia and AMD disclose immense profits as companies, and the PS5 is already profitable. So, Tick Dickler, no, there are not losses. Sony is making money on each PS5 sold, which, by the way, throwback to the guy who says the Switch needs to be that weak. It does not. Sony is making money on each PS5 sold with this performance for $500.
How much more are they charging for the PS5? $150
with a 7 nanometer. Yeah, I mean, yeah, how much profit? What do you think the margins are on the Switch OLED, guys? It's insane. But I put a write-up together here. Yes, there are component shortages. Yes, GDR6 prices are up. Yes, precious metal costs are up. And also, yes, these companies are still making more money despite all of these factors combined. Moore's Law is dead feels it's important to remind people that while some products like the 3060 are practically built to not make profits, and there are real struggles causing production costs to go up, these street prices are still half fueled by insane gamer demand and AIB greed. Were demand to fall apart, it is doubtful every RDNA 2 and Ampere card SKU would easily hit MSRP right away, but many of them would, and none of them require a 50% plus markup on the AIB models for these for reasonable margins. They are making insane margins. Please keep that in mind, people. And I have multiple links here. I kind of combine this. This is after all of this discussion about why costs are going up, why this is happening. It's worth remembering. Oh, the 3060 could probably still make. I don't know if it would make a profit at MSRP, but it'd probably be about breaking even. And the 6600 XT is probably making I don't want to say exactly what the margin is because man, do AIBs not want you to know. They're lying to everyone right now, even some of their contacts. But that is to say that once you get up the product stack, I mean, I'm pretty sure even with increased costs, the 6700 XT at MSRP would probably be making like a 20% or 30% margin. Don't quote me, guys. And things like the 6900 XT are still making huge margins if they were at MSRP. The 3090 for sure does not need to sell for more than MSRP. I think if we're being honest, like the 3080 would be like a $800 card. The 6800 XT would be an $800 card. And again, the reason they'd be the same, I know the 6800 XT has more RAM, but also its PCB is like way cheaper to produce and it requires less cooling. The 6800 would probably be a $600 card, but that would be like with a 45% markup. So the lower you go down the product stack, the harder it is. But still keep in mind that half the reason prices are up so much is because Nvidia wants 60% margins and AMD wants 50% now, and they're getting more than that.
Yeah, and look at the performance there, the financial performance. I'm looking at it right now. Gross profit from their fiscal quarter last year compared to this current fiscal quarter from Nvidia's financial earnings, they're up over, I think that's what? It's about 70%, it looks like. AMD, I think, was up 66%. Not revenue even, that profit. Their revenue was up even more.
Yeah.
They're profiting hand over fist. They're both making tons and tons of money. The PS5 is making tons of money. I guess the diskless version probably isn't.
No, the diskless is sold for a loss, of course, but they don't care. They lock you into their storefront.
Yeah, of course. But that's still being sold at pretty decent loss, I would guess then. But, they're all making a bunch of money right now. And this argument that these shortages are causing them to need to increase prices, kind of bullshit, because they're making tons of money. Like, they don't need to charge this much. Demand is allowing them to charge this much.
I would say that, and the costs, it's funny, the estimates I put together, which were pretty similar to what Bloomberg's people did for the PS5 costs, which on things like that, I don't think they're full of shit, because that doesn't require technological understanding. They just talk to sources about the cost of components. And this is what like I said earlier, I did in the automotive industry. Like, I would put together estimated cost to produce things. I believe the PS5 in a normal year would have been like $450 to $480 to make the disc PS5. And so basically the disc model was at like a 10% loss or 10% profit. The discless model was probably at like a 20 to 10% loss. And my understanding or my suspicion is that the fact that shipping costs just went insane with component shortages is the reason the PS5 ended up selling at a loss over the holiday season. But Sony, I'm told, was buying up a lot of those charter jets because they knew if they could deliver consoles on time, they'd make more money during the holiday season. So they were willing to eat those costs.
And Sony would need to sell it at a further loss to their distributors, so they could those distributors could also make a profit off of it.
Yeah, to a certain extent, they sell from their own website now too.
That's true. Although, I wonder if it's
I don't know that Best Buy makes that much on it anyways, though. They just want you to buy games when you enter the store.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to say, I wonder if the diskless model, there's a new calculus where it's like, no, we're making money off of the diskless version because you motherfuckers are getting all of the profits on the back end of it now.
Yeah, because we're getting that 30%. We're getting that digital cut we can control. You will never be able to just get a used disc on eBay with this one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, but let's just say this. Okay, despite all of the shortages, yes, the PS5 is technically profiting later than usual. I believe it is because of the shipping problems and shortages in the holiday season. But the PS4, if you look it up, guys, the PS4 was profiting, I believe, in March of 2014. So this was like 5 months after it came out, and that was sooner than usual. The PS3 took a lot longer than that to profit. And okay, so now it's August of the following year. So add a few months. Yeah, at the end of the day, it took a little longer, but this is a substantially more technologically advanced console than what the PS4 was for its time, yet also sold for more money. But if you account for inflation, not really.
Yeah, if you account for inflation, it's like $20 more or something like that, right?
Yeah, so but it is more still. Maybe not anymore because of recent inflation, but yeah, it's just apples to apples. I just think the PS5 is making a profit only slightly later than when the PS4 did, adjusted for its launch. And so that should tell you everything you need to know about what's going on with MSRP. That yes, things probably should cost 10 to 20% more moving forward because of all these factors and inflation, but that they should not cost 50% more, and AIBs are just lying through their teeth half the time.
Yes, I think that's been the thesis of this episode so far.
Writes in, hello, Tom. Considering insane price increases for GDDR6 and GDDR6X, did I say too many Ds? No, I said the right amount. I think you said the right. GDD. I'm just used to like not saying one of them, so it feels like to me. GDDR6X will likely go up too. What about HBM? Surely at this point, HBM can't be much more expensive than GDDR6. Can you see Lovelace 102 using HBM instead of GDDR6X, or are Nvidia going all out on GDDR6 again? X again. I would say if you look at the design of Ampere, and then we assume the rumors that Lovelace being kind of a Maxwell to Pascal, so that is to say, improving efficiency, node shrink, maybe a 60 to 80% increase, but not a doubling, not a massively new architecture, almost the same one, really, with a few tweaks. If you look at the design of Ampere, it needs GDDR6X to be close for the signaling and the latency to be good for the performance. This is something told to me and that I communicated to people before the cards even came out. Like, look how close those RAM modules are to the die compared to usual. All right, so if you look at the 12 gigabyte model, there's not much room for more. So from my perspective, so what they can go from 384-bit to what, 448-bit? I think that's been done before on some cards. You can make a 448-bit card. There's no reason, guys, you couldn't like make it so what would that be, like a 14 gigabyte card? Like there's no reason they couldn't have a 14 gigabyte 4080 and a 28 gigabyte Titan. That makes some sense to me. And actually, that amount of RAM would probably be just enough, right up NVIDIA's alley of cutting it close. Maybe just make a 320-bit, 4070. That's what I think they would do. But, it's just not efficient. So I wonder, like, if they're really going to do that. They could. That's the only thing I think they can really do. And it would be really expensive costs. Again, that's, guys, why the PCB is so expensive, because they need to put the... I did some classes designing PCBs in college. Like, the closer you make all the tracing, the more expensive it is. It's just, there's some real screw-ups from that.
Yeah, that's where wiring can easily get screwed up if all of the wires are closer to each other.
That's why the Founders editions of Ampere are so expensive. Look how compact. It's like a Fury Nano, all of them. Which is cool, but it's not cheap. And we'll get into another example of that soon. But yeah, so I think they should use HBM. I think they should have used HBM I really do. I think they should have had a 16 gigabyte HBM2 top Ampere card. It would have been more efficient. They should probably just done a 320-bit GDR6X, or not even bother with it, frankly. I just don't think it's worth it. Just done like a 384-bit 3070 or something, or TI. I just don't think so. I don't think they should use again. But if they do, consider what they will be forced to do. They're going to be forced to use... probably 21. I think they have 23 gigabit now. So that's okay, another 10, 15%. And then they could go up to 448 bits. So you're looking at another like 15%. So yeah, they can increase bandwidth by 50, 60%. They just use the latest GDDR6X with a 448-bit bus. And who knows, maybe on TSMC's node, it just won't be an issue. Who knows? I think that was a big factor with GDDR5 is 5X, is that it's just Pascal was so efficient they had room to spare for, and also that was just better than GDDR6X. So QH Freddy writes in, Tom, I hope you get to address this in your 6600 XT video. Well, we'll see. It's already out. There have been some people claiming that the 6600 XT is a good card for mining based entirely on it having around 20% better peak efficiency than other available cards at this time, and that it will drive the prices up on these cards. How do you parse these claims? It seems to me completely unrealistic, as you have bigger power and cost overheads due to the supporting hardware. And on top of that, that ROI on these cards is of an order of 2x as long as other cards on the market right now. Well, QH Freddy, what I would say is this. I've never seen the 6600, any of the RDNA 2 lineup as being inefficient in mining, really. I mean, if you undervolt, people go, if you undervolt the 3070, it's more efficient than you think. But I don't know, guys. We'll get to the next story where it kind of calls into question how efficient Ampere really is. And I've always called it into question. Like my 6800 XT out of the box, I don't remember. I think it was doing like 60 mega hash for like 125 watts. And then if I tweaked it, I could get like 65 mega hash at 100 watts. If you tweak RDNA 2, it's pretty damn efficient. The thing is, that's like a 40% bigger die than the 3070. So the 3070 Ampere packs more compute into a smaller space, and it's cheaper, apples to apples. It's kind of not really on the street, but you know what I mean, in a normal world. And so I just think RDNA 2 has never been that much worse at mining efficiency. I just think you can get a bunch of cards and out of the box run Ampere better. And I think that I have a link in the description, guys. I was actually told this, again, everyone's acting like I was told this. I've leaked this first, I believe, or was one of the first, that they believe that in Asia there are mining firms that have already cracked even the most hard LHR 3060 cards. There's actually like 5 revisions of the 3060 for mining. Surprise, surprise, guys, the mining firms have cracked 3060 LHR. So at the end of the day, I would say that that's going to keep that 3060 Street price up higher too. I forgot to say that earlier. And I think in the short term, there will be some people that make 6600 XT rigs. This reminds me of my RX 560 rigs, where when other things started drying up, I could get the 560 for MSRP, and I could actually BIOS mod them to get about 14 to 16 mega hash, depending on the model. So I could almost get to 1060 efficiency with these tiny cheap cards, and that was pretty dang good. But that over time, those prices will also go up, and then you'll just go back to ignoring the 6600 XT.
But yeah, and like if you're a miner, you're going to get the things you can, the cards that are available to you, assuming that they mine decently well. Like even, I can't remember the generation right now, even with generations where Nvidia was like clearly worse at mining, sometimes their cards were more available. So everyone would switch to getting Nvidia cards for Ethereum mining.
Yeah. Gosh, Reese, why does Windows 10 Professional have to be so expensive? Don't listen to that, nerd. Listen to me. You can get all the great Windows and gaming keys you need at CDK Offers. I have a plan. Go to cdkoffers.com to get all the Windows Professional and Microsoft Office keys you need, and games as well. Add them to your cart, and you can even apply one of them City Slicker promotional codes like DashRink for 3% off software and Broken Silicon for 25% off all Windows codes. I do have an account on this website, and it is ultra easy to use. Just submit your order, use PayPal, credit card, or Bitcoin, and go to Windows website to download Microsoft Professional. One more time, that's go to cdkoffers.com. They are a fantastic sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead. Use offer code DashRink for 3% off everything on the website, and Broken Silicon for 25% off all Windows products. Now, back to the show. Speaking of mining, a new RX 570 Duo proves the RX 490 was almost a thing in 2016. And so this comes from HXL on Twitter, who shared some pictures of a new custom SAPPHIRE dual Polaris mining card. Here's the write-up. On 8/13, Moore's Law is Dead confirmed some rather crazy news. Not only was SAPPHIRE making a dual RX 570 mining card with impressive performance, giving 60 mega hash per second at 125 to 200 watts, which I do now say 125 to 200. It's somewhat disputed if it was just the dies using 125 watts. But nonetheless, basically, this is a dual 14 nanometer Polaris card that is giving you pretty similar to Ampere mining efficiency for far less, I assume. But its design is based on an old canceled RX 490 dual Polaris card from 2016. SAPPHIRE, and I did confirm this, guys, for that video. This wasn't just based on what public info. Indeed partnered with AMD on some designs for high-end gaming Polaris cards that were canceled due to concerns regarding production costs, timing before Vega's launch, and driver support. Yes, there was a dual Polaris card, but people need to understand that looking at this PCB, that's not what this GPU leaked by HXL on Twitter is. This is a different PCB built to be bulky and therefore cheaper to produce, which we've also discussed earlier. And it uses some of the remaining Polaris stocks that were put on hold during component shortages. And again, so after this video came out, as often happens, I had a few AMD sources reach out to me. One of them said, oh, for sure, by the way, we were considering several workstation and gaming dual Polaris designs. Most were canceled. Obviously, some of them did come out. They're the workstation. And additionally, another source confirmed that this card was canceled before the final stages you go through before product confirmation and production. So basically, it was starting to be communicated. SAPPHIRE knew about it first, but then last minute they were just like, no, let's not finish it and start producing them.
I thought it was pretty funny with the I think WCCF article or one of them that you cite in the 490 initially leaked 5 years ago now, by AMD accidentally posting that the 490 was a card that exists. I mean, I'm curious why they decided to cancel the card, given that it seems like at least this 570 is relatively power efficient at its worst.
At least.
Yeah, at 200 watts, which, yeah, I guess I don't know how customized that miner was, but
well, so I'm assuming you didn't watch my video leaking this stuff, though, right?
I did, but I did.
Okay, so what I say in the video, Dan, if you pay attention, brah, is that I had an RX 570 rig, and I got them to, I think, around 28 mega hash. These were 4 gigabyte cards with slower memory. 28 mega hash at, I think, like 150 watts around there or something. It was somewhere between like 140 and 170. But the thing is, it was dual mining. It was mining Ethereum and Siacoin at the same time. If I was solo mining, I'm sure they would have been like 120 watts. So that's okay. That's a card with older memory. I didn't try that hard to be efficient with them. Consider that if they are, based on the information coming out now, using the latest GDR5 with custom by SAPPHIRE mining BIOSes and voltages and memory timings, it's not at all hard for me to believe they could make like a 200 watt dual one that's 30 mega hashes. Not hard at all, actually. It's very easy for me to believe that. And that the reason AMD, and so SAPPHIRE must have then worked with AMD on this, and they took some old design, modified it a little bit more so that, because if you look at it, it's like a crazy fat card, and that's because it's not going in any case, guys. So it makes it even cheaper to produce for them. And yeah, I think that had to have come from an old design, and that old design was the 4090, and that 4090 was never released because of a few reasons, right? So number one, like a lot of people were like, RX 480, oh, it's 250 or less, and it beats the 1080 in Crossfire. Oh, so they could make a $500 or maybe even what, $450 card? I remember rumors swirling around at the time about that. Could they make a $400 dual 480 or 470 that beats the 1080? That would be crazy, especially when you consider back then the 1080 was really a $700 card in 2016's holiday season or more. I saw them for $800 for the good AIB models all the time back then. That's because it was just the strongest card and it was selling out like crazy. 1080 Ti was not out yet. Now, of course, by the time Vega came out, it had a price drop and yada, yada, yada. But what you then need to consider is this. Go look at actual benchmarks of Crossfire. The 480 Crossfire was oftentimes like 10% better than a 1080. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to brag about being 10% better. We'll assuredly using at least 300 watts to get there.
And how are the frame times? I wonder on that too.
Exactly. I was told by an AMD source, I forgot to say this a second ago, an AMD source told me that this was due to driver concerns, that it just wasn't worth it, that it would have required an immense amount of work to make the 295 X2 have good drivers for Crossfire, which it did. But like to do that again for a product, like, so we're putting all this effort into this dual Polaris card for drivers, like double the work for how many of these we're even going to make. Is it really even going to end up being stronger than a 1080 while using 50% more energy than a 1080? Won't we look like idiots? Like AMD but like pointed out, shall we say, in several presentations for about a month. Ooh, if you Crossfire the 480, it's 10% better than a 1080. And if you have 3, it's like 50% better. And it's cheaper. You can even get 3 of them for less than a 1080 sometimes, depending on the models. And then, like, people pointing out, 500 watts if you're using 3 of them or more, and taking up a case that. So, what are people buying an HEDT motherboard for 3 low-end cards? What are you talking about?
Instead of getting a 1080, I'm going to now buy a really high-end power supply and HEDT motherboard and a probably like $150, $200 case to actually fit all of that shit in it.
Which I guess at the time, it was before Ryzen. I guess Pile Driver's AM3 Plus motherboards came with 32 lanes of PCIe, so I guess you could have conceivably made a budget build with your
8350,
your 8350, or 9590, 300 watt. Yeah, your 300 watt dual. AMD didn't think it looked good that they would be like, yeah, go get our 300 watt CPU to Crossfire our 400 watt graphics card instead of just getting an i5 and a 1080 for less. Like, that's why, guys.
And I guess while you're at it, also get a computer that's powered by 2 power supplies instead of 1, because now we're starting to brush up against the limits.
You probably need a 1,000 watt.
Yeah, and a good 1,000 watt, because a crappy one might even have issues.
Oh, well, yeah, a crappy one's probably worse than a 500 watt half the time.
That's true.
But I mean, and so then consider this as well, that it costs more to make than the 1080 probably. And so would they really even make it for less than 500? Because now this is your flagship gaming card. You're going to want it to feel nice. The 295 X2 sold for $1,500, almost triple the price of a 290X. So it's probably going to be like a $550 card. So again, our argument is get our half the efficiency, barely stronger card for 30% less than a 1080, but you need a better power supply. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And, Polaris was selling out like crazy. The mining boom was starting to get going a little bit. Polaris was selling very, very well back then. There were some dips due to overproduction, of course, and eventually they were selling them for dirt cheap. But that's what they were thinking is, we're not having a hard time selling Polaris. We're taking the mid-range market pretty well right now, and Vega's right around the corner, which is the final thing I point out in that video. They thought Vega was going to be out late spring. It didn't, but they did think it would, and they knew that would be about this performance anyway, so why bother again? There's just so many reasons there's a lot of reasons they did not release this, and it is interesting that it definitely existed, though. And that, I guess the final thing I want to say about this story is I do like that they're making this, though. This is old Polaris stock. I'm told there's probably like a couple 100,000 lying around in warehouses between different AIBs. They stopped making them when there were shortages on power components. Because again, are you going to make a 580 when you could make a 6700 XT with that same capacitor? Probably not. So they just stockpiled the dies, and now they're doing the final runs. And this is way better than, I'm not going to say the AIB's names, but I've already quoted it, that there's some AIBs now launching $400 580s. That's ridiculous. This is way better to just make a mining card. That helps the market so much more.
Yeah, and that's, mining cards that are now not using new dies that, a bunch of 3000 series cards could have been made, but, whatever.
Writes in, if Monet does truly exist on 12 nanometer, which for the record, guys, and I've been told this is real, that it was leaked, I don't even know, like a month ago now, and I've been told around that, I think I covered in that Broken Silicon that the people I asked said, yeah, this is correct. And Monet is a 12 nanometer Zen 3 quad core APU with, probably 2 to 4, I would hope 4 RDNA 2 compute units. But, it's on 12 nanometer at Global Foundries, so that's really cool. And let's be honest, they're making it, guys, because they never need to cut down Cezanne to 4 cores, ever. Their yields are way too good on those 150 millimeter squared chips to ever need to do that, or 170 millimeter, I think. So, yeah, it makes sense on an old node to trying, this is good practice for them backporting, and because it's basically a half Cezanne, well, it might just be like even if it loses half of its efficiencies cut in half, which it probably will be, at the end of the day, you're going to end up making something that is still a 15-watt quad-core, 25-watt quad-core, perfect for the low-end market. And, Um's question is, if they're doing this, will this fabled RX 6490 become real? And that's that video I did talking about why AMD would or wouldn't make like I don't even know what I said it would be, like a 3240 compute unit, 12 nanometer card that's like 250 watts. So like way less efficient, obviously, than like a 6600 XT for like probably a little less performance than a 6600 XT, because instead of running at like 2.7 gigahertz, it's running at like, 1400. Like, what would they do this though? Because they could probably make it for less. And my answer is still probably no, for the same reasons I pointed out there, where it's probably not worth it for the market to do that hard design when they're just going to keep buying up tons of 5 nanometer capacity soon anyways. Probably not is my answer. But the fact that they are designing some version of RDNA 2 in an APU on 12 nanometer does make me take pause, though, and go, well, maybe not a 6490, but a 6390, a 7490? Like maybe something that is like a $150 card. I don't know. With 8 gigabytes of RAM next year? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think as our last story says, like if a bunch of AIBs do have, a small amount of old dies laying around, that might be what they end up selling instead of, completely designing a new a new graphics
exactly,
card.
though, right? Because, and this is something Daniel Nenny pointed out to me. As part of that video, there's this mini Daniel Nenny interview in there, because I reach out to these experts for their expertise when I'm, speculating on things. He points out, guys, TSMC is not capacity constrained really anymore. And while they might be on 5 nanometer, that does not mean they will be on 7 nanometer. They're building new capacity. They're building so much more. They're spending $100 billion or something insane. Consider then that it doesn't necessarily mean it will help that much to put a graphics card on it when you've already designed it for 7 nanometer and you already have a Navi 22. Why not just make the 7500 XT be a 6700 XT? Why? Just rebrand it to the 7500 XT instead of using Global Foundries, because once they move to 5 nanometer, 7 nanometer capacity is freeing up just like Global Foundries, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, story number 5. Nvidia blocks FSR support despite its easy implementation. And I have a write-up here. It says, I just want to take the time to discuss this. It has come to my attention recently through some discussions with contacts that 4A seemingly still has no plans to add FSR support as of this month. So that would be to games like, Metro Exodus. And this is not just about that article from May with Notebook Check talking to them, which it's in the description, guys. But it just seems like they still have no plans for this, and that it does seem like there are, in fact, some NVIDIA-sponsored titles with DLSS that NVIDIA is kind of telling devs, you will not add FSR if you want our support, helping you basically make half of the next game. And I just think that's pathetic. It makes no sense to me based on talks I've had with other developers that FSR takes less than a day to implement with great effects. The best example I've seen is Arcadegeddon. It is a PS5 early access indie game. So think about what that means. This is a small dev team, limited resources on a console, and they added it. They said in less than a day to a console that's in early access, and it seems to work really well. They're running ray tracing in the puddles in the game at 4K or FSR 4K. And yes, sometimes the native resolution drops somewhere, but it's it looks way better than it would otherwise. And an indie dev does not have time to program everything to be really optimized. And they said the fact that we can use ray tracing with FSR means we don't have to do as much pre-baked lighting, and it now runs at an okay frame rate. And they can't use DLSS because they say DLSS is hard to use.
And also it's not implemented along with another new version of TAA that's in Unreal Engine 5, I believe. So it's
isn't that though because Unreal Engine 5 they just want you to use TSR? They have their own custom version of FSR.
Yeah, I think what they're using it's TAAU, so temporal anti-aliasing with upscaling or something like that. So they're using two different upscaling techniques, and yeah, they seem to have implemented it to great effect. The game looks, at least visually, it looks pretty good.
Oh,
I don't know about the gameplay wise.
Yeah. Oh, so you're saying, and it's another game that had other things and they still said it was worth it. Okay, I'm sorry for cutting you off there. Yeah, I mean, so again, some of this kind of made the rounds a while ago, but I think it's resurfacing because, at least in the people I'm talking to, because they're well, yeah, they denied they were working on it in May, but it's now, as far as I can tell, they still have no plans to do it. And that's just really pathetic. I don't know. and so I need to amend some of my statements, which is to say, look, we already have some games that have DLSS that have added FSR. So to say all DLSS games won't have FSR is ridiculous. I think a lot of games will both. I think a lot of games will get patched to have FSR, and they should be. I just think that, there are going to be a handful of NVIDIA-sponsored titles, whatever the next Metro game is. And who knows, I'm trying to think of another game, but that are Cyberpunk, I think, is one where they're acting like they're never going to add it, which is good because Cyberpunk's definitely optimized and easy to run, right, Dan? And it's not like there's any consoles that could really benefit from FSR right now. God, what a bunch of fucking just anti-consumer company. But yeah, it's pathetic. And I get it. 4A made Metro last light during a civil war. I get it, but I get why they need NVIDIA's funding, but it's still it just pisses me off. And I think it needs to be brought to everyone's attention just to understand that I need to amend my statement that every game will have FSR. There's still going to be some token ones from NVIDIA that won't, clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let us move on then to story number 6. Intel poised to make large quantities of 3nm products at TSMC. And I'm quoting here, we'll see if it was a mistake, from WCCF Tech. TSMC has reportedly won a huge order of its 3nm process node from Intel, who will be using the new technology to develop next-generation chips. Quoting its sources within the supply chain, Chinese, that's wrong, it's a Taiwanese media outlet, UDN, has reported that Intel has grabbed the majority of TSMC's 3nm process node orders for the production of its next-generation chips. The news outlet quotes that production is expected to commence at TSMC at 18B Fab during quarter 2 2022, and mass production for products is expected to commence by mid-2023. The production capacity is expected to hit 4,000 wafers by then. And so, yeah, kind of just skipping ahead here. I have some other stories, one from Tom's Hardware, the original source. Adored TV mentions Arrow Lake should be on TSMC 3nm. There does seem to be, at the very least, and there were already rumors of Intel using 3nm for some of their chips. Yeah, and TSMC 3nm for some of their chips a few months ago. It seems pretty much confirmed now. I mean, Adored and this leak, I think so. And from what I'm told, I reached out to a source. They're like, yes, for sure it's happening. If it's all of the capacity, I can't independently confirm, but it would make some sense that they would buy up as much as they can. I'll give my opinion as to why in a second, but what do you think about this, Dan?
I mean, just to check with the source and everything, obviously, I'm not Taiwanese, so I don't know the news sources from Taiwan very well. It seems like it's a pretty conventional news source, so I don't see why there's any reason to doubt that validity. I don't have much to add to that other than that, though, because it's kind of been a thing that we've at least assumed was true or assumed was going to happen to some extent for a while.
To some extent, yeah.
Intel moving some of its production over to TSMC. Like, we've been talking about that for months and months now. I don't even know how long it's been.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is if they're buying up tons of 3nm, I still assume Apple's buying up a bunch for the beginning as well, or something's going on there. There's also rumors of custom 5nm nodes that AMD is getting access to early 2022. So there could be an argument that AMD may have be planning to just use that in 4nm at the same time and then move to 2nm quicker. Who knows? But I do want to address, because I was talking to one source about this, and he was saying to me, is this, and a lot of people are saying, he asked if this made sense, and I was like, I don't know if it does. A lot of news outlets are portraying this as Intel buying up 3nm to block out AMD because they're going to have a horrible node. I just wouldn't frame it that way. The way I would frame Intel buying up a bunch of 3nm production is this. Does anyone remember the massive capacity problems Intel had on 14nm before the greater shortages going on with everyone else? It hit Intel first. They know that capacity is just worth it at this point. And so if I was Intel, I would try to buy up a bunch of TSMC 3nm, because why not? There's only upside. If they're Intel, I guess it'll be called Intel 4 now, what they used to call 5nm. If their Intel 4 node is delayed, whatever, we're making at least some of our mobile chips, it sounds like, on TSMC's 3nm. It's a backup to if our node's delayed, and even if our node isn't delayed, whatever, we'll just make some products on Intel 7, Intel 4, and TSMC 3. That we had 14nm product capacity problems, and that was when we had worse products than the competition. If we're to believe, and I believe it, that Intel will be far more competitive with AMD over the next few years, I think they're going to have even more capacity problems if they did when they were inferior.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing I would also add is another big part of that story is that, which I don't know what the validity to that is even more so than the AMD, but also was to buy or outcompete or edge out Apple from buying 3nm capacity.
Right, because people keep forgetting that Apple buys their newest node usually, right? Yeah, that was something Daniel Nenny explained. Again, excellent Broken Silicon episode, guys. He explained, Apple makes smaller chips and they pay the most, so they get the newest node first, and then AMD lately has just been buying up all of the capacity in their wake as they start transitioning to a new one. That's just what they've been doing because it just makes sense. So if Intel's blocking out Apple, like I said, it's almost like, AMD kind of has their own custom 5 nanometer possibly, and they're moving to 4 nanometer are rumors for like Zen 5. If that's all, or like some sort of custom 3 or a 2 nanometer, if all of this is true, yeah, it might be screwing over Apple the most, not AMD actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and people keep forgetting this. Apple is just a
although
Apple is a huge threat. They are making their own chips, guys. I wonder if they will become the next Intel.
And I was just going to add, although I think Apple has a lot of money. I think they can spend the money they need to acquire the capacity they need. Or I think they could probably outbid Intel, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess the last thing,
unless they don't see it as worth it for some reason for them.
The last thing I would say then that you're kind of hinting at is it's like, this is technically a rumor, so we shouldn't just take this as fact. Still, there's been a lot of good websites that, like DigiTimes, that quote have these like crazy big things about silicon at TSMC, and then like it turns out half of it's wrong, and then half of it's wrong probably because they misinterpreted something, not because they're lying. And so I don't know. I'm not saying UDN isn't doing this correctly or whatever, or isn't correctly interpreting information they have from sources. I'm just saying that it would be surprising if Apple wasn't making some of it on the latest. But I guess we'll see. Because Apple could just buy Intel like 5 times. They could probably buy Intel right now just with cash, not even like moving money around. Just like use that account.
Yeah, I mean, depends on how liquid they are, I guess. That would be a pretty huge acquisition even for them.
I forgot, what it was, but it was like someone pointed out that like their reserves of cash were like more than like all of Sony and Intel put together is what I heard, but I could be wrong. I think they literally do just have a lot of cash because they think it's a good idea right now so they can do crazy moves.
Maybe.
Maybe you should Google it, Dan, because I'm sure someone could prove one of us wrong. But moving on to Root Knight's question. On the wave of people absolutely losing their mind over Intel buying 3 nanometer capacity and high volume, how much do you foresee that affecting AMD's ability to supply 3 nanometer wafers in the future? Honestly, Root Knight, if you ask me this question in that direct of a way, I say I can't say for sure. It's technically a rumor. AMD has undoubtedly bought up tons of 5 nanometer capacity, so maybe they're just doubling down on a custom 5 nanometer node first and then moving to 2 or 4 for some products. It's really hard to say. I mean, and look at Nvidia. They just used 12 nanometer for Turing and did fine against AMD's products for a very long time. So, and I think some people would go, it's just nodes that make AMD competitive. No, bullshit. AMD's got some good architectures, and I don't see any evidence. People think I hype up Intel's stuff, but it's like, I'm not hyping it up. I'm just the only one saying it's going to be good. I think AMD's got great stuff coming too on an architectural level. And Monet may prove how good they are at using different nodes for, so we'll see,
Yeah, we'll see.
If everyone's kind of assuming, because from what I'm told, Rocket Lake was a bigger success than their worst worries, which is hilarious because it sucks. But, well, we'll see. Everyone's kind of assuming AMD will be worse at transitioning Zen 3 to 12 nanometer with Monet, similar Rocket Lake situation. What if they're better? What if they're better at, using older nodes for newer stuff? It's just very hard for me to say, at least Root Knight, I'm interpreting your question as meaning, how much would it affect their ability to supply wafers? Well, it affects it. They bought it. But if your question is really asking how much does it affect their competitiveness, I can't say for sure.
Yeah, or their future plans, because I would assume AMD wouldn't move to 3 nanometer until 2023 probably, right?
Yeah, end of it
not?
Probably. So maybe they don't even need it right away. Maybe Intel bought up the first capacity and they're planning to launch like a Zen 5 at the end of the year. Or, well, I guess that's probably incorrect based on what I just read here. But you guys see what I mean. We don't even know how much of it they would want to use right away. All right, that is it. Let us get into the wrap up, which the first one actually kind of leads into this, which there was this mysterious Reddit post of a bunch of architectures by a person by the name of Moore's Law is not dead. I'm going to be honest, guys. I think I might know who this even is that I've talked to. So Like, I don't know why they would name themselves the opposite of my name, but I just have to say this. This post here, I know about some of it. Actually, I know about pretty much any of it that I think is true. But some of it seems wrongly worded. And some of the architecture's features seem mixed up to me. And so I just want to point out that for big fans of the channel, you guys got to understand that half of this stuff I've literally said publicly. And that I think a lot of these websites just haven't noticed. And like, look at even in this Reddit post, this Lunar Lake, this product will use TSM3 as reported by Nikkei. Okay, so this post wasn't the first to say it. From far as I can tell, and the Arrow Lake thing, Jim said some different things. And I know about Arrow Lake, guys. I don't think Jim's wrong about anything he said. As I didn't say Arrow Lake first, sue me. But, I'll confirm that's a real one. This just seems like rehashed stuff from me and other people put together with his own guesses. Some of this is wrong. So I'm just going to directly say that. Having said that, I'm working on an Intel leak, guys, now. I guess I have to. And I think it's funny Jim references this before he puts out his Arrow Lake video, because it's like me and him are now like, well, I guess we're going to talk about it before we wanted to. But that's the important thing. Like, really, guys, Nova Lake, yes, that's a real code name. I'll confirm it. But I'm not going to say everything until I feel like it. That's 2025. What I've been told directly from a couple sources, both AMD and Intel, right? And they do differ a little bit, but at least at Intel, guys, everything till 2022 is locked in stone already. Whatever they're going to have, they're going to have. Only thing that could change is how good the yields are on the node or how they decide to segment things. That's it. Their architectures, designs are locked in, that's it. Yeah. They maybe change core counts on some SKUs. That's it. None of that's going to change. So it's maybe worth leaking Meteor Lake. Oh, wait, who was the first one to do that and mention stuff about Redwood Cove? Me. So things like Lunar Lake are not completely done being designed. And things like Nova Lake are literally in like pathfinding. Like, they might radically change. In fact, I'm going to tell you guys that what's in Nova Lake and Lunar Lake, the code names have changed, just so you know, since 6 months ago. I'm just telling you. So when you ask me, is Darkmont in Nova Lake, Intel doesn't know yet. So that's why I don't leak these things that far away. I mean, will Moore's Law is Dead still exist in 4 years? Maybe. But, I mean, so leaking this stuff that far ahead is frankly silly. And what did you learn? Nothing. A code name and nothing about its performance, really. Because, by the way, I might leak it. I know some key things about its performance that this guy does not know.
Well, I mean, what about the big Zen 8 leak, Tom? That's about to come out by.
There's one tech tuber said, I know everything about Zen 6. It's like, well, AMD doesn't, so. In fact, when I'm told it specifically, I'm just saying it, I'm being honest right now. AMD doesn't even talk about Zen 5 a lot right now, guys. So when you see like detailed stuff about Zen 5, again, so what did I say before? At Intel, 2025 is pathfinding, 2023 is being finalized, 2022, 2023 is kind of locked in, 2024 and 2023 is being finalized around there. AMD's isn't exactly the same as that, but it's probably similar, and like they don't even talk about Zen 5 a lot. And let me think, Zen 4 is 2022, so yeah, that's probably not even done. Like,
yeah,
So, and by the way, it's again, I haven't even really looked at this in detail until now. I'm looking at it. Like, Nova Lake will launch the biggest architectural change. I've already said that.
Wait, what? Which one is this? Nova Lake?
Yeah, it's like Nova Lake, and it's like, and some of this seems wrong to me, but like this reads like exactly what I said in a video and a podcast. Biggest architectural change. And like, didn't I say that literally? Like, this is almost word for word what I've said in a podcast.
Maybe. I mean,
and what he says in performance and CPU, I've said this. This is just summarizing what I've said, but he knew some of the code names.
Yeah.
That's about it. That's all I can say, guys. If you're a fan of the channel, most of this isn't new. Although some of this looks really wrong to me, but it will end up being wrong because stuff changes in 4 years. Anyways, let's move on to the rest of the wrap-up. Another big thing worth pointing out is doubt over the ARM deal, supposedly. That's been popping up a lot, but Nvidia just sold a ton of shares. And
you mean
Jensen. I said Nvidia instead of Jensen.
Nvidia sold its own shares.
It's like when Trump called Tim Apple.
No, Tim, whatever.
Whatever his name is. What's his name?
Well, it's Tim Appleton.
It's Tim Apple. Okay. Yeah. The CEO of Apple, Tim Apple. Yeah, I mean, I just bring up this article because I've been told from insiders that, like, the ARM deal might go through, but it's not 100%. And everyone's acting like, oh, it's going to happen. And it's like, no, there's a lot of jobs for defense reasons they want to keep in the UK, guys.
Oh, yeah, and ARM's a British company, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, and people go, oh, it's owned by a Japanese. Yeah, but the jobs are controlled in the UK. MI6 could get involved if they wanted to on things. Hint, hint. There's reasons you want to keep your some silicon design companies in your country. Not to say it won't go through, but I'm just saying, I feel like people are too much assuming this will go through and saying Xilinx is the same thing. It's not. There's entirely different reasons ARM may not happen.
Yeah, and just and I guess this is a multinational deal, though, but I don't know. All this consolidation, at a certain point, monopolies are going to start being called like, no, we're not letting this happen anymore, this corporate consolidation.
Which, yeah, I expect there will be some more crackdowns on that soon. It's a European country. Well,
yeah,
you can argue if UK is a European country anymore. They voted they're not, apparently. But yeah, let's move.
They are part of that landmass. They did not vote to be on a new continental plate.
You talk to some of the people in interviews there. It seems like that's what they think they voted for. So another story here, dual Navi 21 for Max Pro. So, I mean, I don't know. That's interesting. What is this high speed? 64 gigabytes of GDR6. Yeah, but it's probably 32 times 2. There is a dual 6900 XT you can get now and a Mac product. That's kind of cool.
Can't wait for that to launch and for people on Reddit to make fun of how overpriced Mac products are, even though they're not.
Even though you literally can't even get this graphics card on Windows.
I know.
Also, this came out, I believe, today. No, yesterday as of when we were recording this. Yeah, so not today. But Navi 31 and 33 GPUs listed. So I guess that's not news, but it's like, well, there you go, Dan. Officially, there's a code name floating around Navi 31 and 33. The only thing I do want to say, though, with some of these leaks, though, AMD messed with people like crazy a few times before the RDNA 2 launch. Like, they leaked literally false things in drivers. Guys, do you think they might not be doing this all now? Because that worked really well. A lot of leakers completely effed up their coverage of RDNA 2 because of AMD literally putting false code in drivers. I just would be very careful doubling down on code leaks from AMD anymore.
And I've got to say, like, just Navi 31, 32, 33, like, and their discussion here of like the MCM versus monolithic design. I feel like we've talked about these concepts just offhand on the podcast. Like, oh, what if there's an 2-tile 80 CU design for RDNA 3? It's like, I don't even know how much you can glean from this that you couldn't just glean from educated guessing.
Yeah, I don't know if that's how it's organized technically, but to be honest, I haven't paid much attention to like these block diagram mock-ups because I don't have time to like go through, okay, wait, which leaker did this come from? Is this one I think is reliable? Is this one? And because like a lot of times these leaker websites will just quote mock-ups and then like say, oh, it was confirmed by Copite, when it's like, no, what Copite said is it makes sense. He didn't say it's confirmed. Like, you know, and I'm not saying that's in this circumstance. I'm just saying, like, I got my own AMD sources. I leaked the entire RDNA 2 lineup like a month before it came out. Even cards that didn't come out for a year. I'll do it the same way. You know, I'm not going to like try to parse together leaks and drivers because I find that to not be necessary. If you can just be patient and then get it right, you know, half a year or a few months ahead of time and be 100% right instead of all this, you know, shenanigans where AMD is definitely messing with people. Another thing in the wrap up, a 2070-watt RTX 3060 introduced. This is another card that would be funny to mess with. I would laugh if this outperformed the 3060. But it is a low-profile, mid-range card. I put this in here. I mean, obviously, it's just interesting in and of itself. The A-series professional cards, I think, look really cool. And this one's a little baby A6000.
A prop from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey that they attached to a graphics card, but
it looks like an obelisk.
I think it looks nice. But I think it looks nice.
But I just, you know, I talked about this in the recent die shrink, which of course patrons have access to. about like why aren't more low profile cards made, and it's like, well, I just think the gaming market has decided we don't want small cards anymore. We're not going to reward those designs because they used to exist all over the place. And I mean, this is $450 for a professional version of a full die, though, GA106. 3060 is not the full die. A full die GA106 6GB card. A gaming version of this could assuredly be sold for like for the same price as less than a 3060 since it has less RAM. They could make a $350 3060 low profile if they wanted to right now. It's just the market has decided we'll just use bigger cases or make cases that can fit huge graphics cards that are actually smaller than some older low profile cases, guys. So it's just, they could make them if they wanted to. Here's proof. They really could make up to the mid-range, I believe, in low profile. Gigabyte confirms 6+8 Alder Lake mobile CPU. Of course, I leaked that months ago. There's some talk about them, the Air Lake, Adored Lake. It's like, we knew what they were doing with their mobile a while ago. Intel poaches someone from Nvidia, I believe. I would just say I've already heard of something called Z super sampling being referred to for a DLSS competitor at Intel. Now they poached someone that pioneered DLSS. Suggests Intel
pioneered.
Yeah,
pioneered DLSS, and also he has a bunch of papers on foveated rendering techniques and stuff like that. So might be a new intellectual leader at Intel. We'll see.
Guys, there's no evidence Intel isn't doubling down on making graphics cards. Really. There's no evidence. They're not just going to run away. There's no evidence. Intel removes Cannon Lake graphics drivers despite never enabling graphics on Cannon Lake. I just think that's funny.
To add another joke to that, I think it's really funny. The one comment on the article on Tom's Hardware is, it's a little soon to remove graphics support.
That's pretty good. Alder Lake DDR4 benchmarks come out against DDR5. Surprise, it's slower.
Unsurprising?
Well, yeah, and this is what, 3,200 megahertz versus 4,800. Okay, so I would just say, we don't know how well 36 or 3,800 megahertz will work. DDR4 is really fast now. And we don't, what was this? It was tested on 12900K. So we don't know how much in a lot of real world benchmarks this will matter. This was done, I think, isn't this done on user bench? So even cares. Let's see. On user bench. So it's not like this is real world. We don't know if the i5 will need more than DDR4. I think it's going to be a lot of both. I think at first they were going to focus on DDR4 motherboards for Alder Lake, but then they said, I guess everyone's buying expensive stuff now. Let's focus on DDR5. Maybe that's also when they decided to overclock Alder Lake so they could say, but it's better than the 5950X, so buy expensive motherboards, almost HEDT, as we discussed in the last news episode. I don't know. I'd still think that their budget boards will have a lot of DDR4 offerings, and that I'm guessing the i5s and lower won't need DDR5.
Yeah, and user benchmark. I would think their benchmarks would be valid comparing literally the two of the same CPU, but who knows? User benchmark.
Isn't that the one that
fun
manipulates things against AMD? I don't even remember which one that was.
User benchmark's the one that, like, as soon as AMD started performing better multi-threaded against Intel, they shifted their benchmarks to, as far as I can tell, only account for single thread performance.
Well, and then they shifted it again. It's the one where every new AMD CPU lineup that comes out, they change their algorithm mysteriously right when AMD does something better.
And it's their website that in their About section has a, not literally, but essentially a fuck hardware unboxed tab.
Yeah, which a lot of websites seem to have for simply telling the truth. Yeah. So I would just say I would not read into this much, both in good and bad ways. Look, DDR5, though I'm told isn't giving much better results on most tests. My motherboard contacts who are testing these told me, so I wouldn't worry about it yet. AMD implements a queue for RDNA 2 purchases, so I thought that was worth pointing out just because, like, the website was down kind of for me once when I checked, and it's like, it's because they're not even letting you shop on the store. Well, there's graphics cards that you can get in a queue for. So as much as we give them shit for not having a reference 6600 XT, it is selling at MSRP, and now AMD's added a queue from their own website. And my understanding is AMD sells substantially more and I've always said this, I believe it's like Nvidia's founders are like not even 1% of the production. They don't want you to buy them. There's been like 2 drops on Best Buy, and they've only to fulfill contracts is what I found out recently. And basically AMD's been selling about like 5 to 10% of their production on their website at MSRP, and that they don't have to do that. So now that they're adding a queue, it still seems like they're trying to be a little more pro-consumer than Nvidia.
I think that's the thing that every website is going to need.
I mean, what the hell?
To do at some point. It like any time a tech product is released, it's essentially a self-inflicted DDoS attack on your website. So
yeah, well, then there was one when Silver Knights came on my podcast. Apparently, their website crashed when everyone went there to look at their PCs to buy. Which, Silver Knights, you know what? Friends of the show, go buy their PCs. They actually, if you buy from them, they're not overcharging you, and they do a good job. I can't say that, but it is funny that I crashed their website when I had them on. Let's see. AMD continues to take CPU market share. I don't know. We need to talk about that too much. Of course they are. And 5-nanometer MI200 Arcturus launches end of year. Didn't we already say? I feel like we've confirmed this a million times when it's coming out. I had an Arcturus leak a long time ago, like I think 2019 or early 2020. And I think I've already talked about Arcturus for a very long time. I leaked that it was a multi-chiplet design, I think in 2019, didn't I?
I don't even remember at this point. Arcturus has just been a thing that like pops up every 3 months, like since your YouTube channel has existed, I feel like, in the news.
And I feel like we've known everything we needed to know for a very long time. So, yep.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on then to the final reader mails. Doomberry writes in, "Hey, Tom, you've discussed the Super Switch's potential SoC at length, but I haven't heard you talk about the actual physical layout of the console. For example, I'd like better triggers like the PS5. So yeah, like haptics and some of the resistance triggers. But I don't really care. I don't really care about the infrared sensor or the advanced haptic motors themselves. What would you like to see changed in the Super Switch's design? I would say it would be cool if they added a more advanced Nintendo controller that you hold when it's docked, especially if the Super Switch is Lovelace in like more than 1,024 CUDA cores with DLSS baked in. That could be something that performs not obviously as well. I'm trying to think of CUDA core counts here. Not obviously as well as a PS5, but maybe half as well. And it sounds like maybe better than the Xbox around an Xbox Series S. Having something, especially when you add DLSS, and that having something, where when it's docked, it felt like a full, next gen controller experience would be smart inside the actual portable console, which I'm 100% under the assumption right now, and no one's told me otherwise, that the Super Switch is, again, it's called the Super Switch. It's going to be the same idea, docked, removable controllers, portable. Mm-hmm. Things like haptic motors, vibration, a trigger that pushes against you, take up space and use battery. So I just doubt it would be in portable version.
Yeah, and I would also say I would like to see Nintendo Switch's controller layout not have the face buttons pointlessly reversed from every other controller design. That's just confusing and pointless. We've settled on a standard controller design. Get with the times, Nintendo. And I also will say I kind of hope they don't call it a Super Switch, because I feel like
I like that name. I haven't been told that's the name. It could be called the Switch 2, could be called the Switch Pro, could be called something entirely different.
I guess it's not as confusing as the Wii U, because I know some less informed people were confused by the Wii U's naming, because it's just doesn't sound like it's a new console.
What if it was like a crazy decadent high-end sounding name, like the Switch Ultra or the, I almost said Switch Supreme. Sounds like a hamburger.
Switch Magnum.
Maybe not that one.
Not
that one. I don't think. I think that feels like they're selling something else. I would say, I don't know. I think as long as it's a similar layout, though, people would just say, "Oh, this is the Switch that games in 4K, and this is the Switch that games in 720p." I don't know.
Yeah.
It should be radically more powerful, though, so you might argue they don't want to do that. Tick Dickler writes in, "Hello, boyos. Tom, I should say, hello, boyos. Tom, you were fantastic on Sacred Symbols. Plus, I could be wrong, but a while back, didn't Sony hate the idea of a PS5 Pro? what do you think changed? The one-upsmanship from Microsoft? You seem really confident in that episode that Sony was making a PS5 Pro. And it's on my, you guys notice, it's on my whiteboard behind me, which Video Cards also tweeted about that. Like, wait, what? Anyone notice that's on his whiteboard? Is this synergy for their 4K, their 8K TV lineup? Seen Nvidia get a full console's price by stapling 2 gigabytes to a 3080. Thanks and love you, Dan. Your ums are my nirvana. Clapping emojis. So, no, I mean, look, if there's a PS5 Pro, which I believe there is, and I've been told that I've been told that both companies are working on Pro consoles directly. But they don't want to tell me anything else because Sony would murder people. Sony can be very controlling, a bit of a control freak, I've heard, when you work with them, which sounds about right for the company. From my understanding, for the whole PS5 itself evolution, is this year is about mostly internal redesigns for cost reductions, which I think Colin has confirmed on Sacred Symbols as well. He's really good PlayStation sources. And then 2022 is about the 6nm refresh for a Slim to also further reduce costs. And then 2023 should be the Pro PS5. So if you think about that's coming out, it's probably some RDNA 3 based or later. So again, both the Xbox Series X have and the PS5 have customizations that aren't, and I hate this, but I'm putting in quotes, RDNA 2 level. They have enhancements. Xbox focused a lot on some ray tracing, variable rate shading tweaks. Sony did on geometry, and some also like variable rate shading stuff. And ray tracing, different ways they've done it. But I would just assume it's like RDNA 3 and 4 based, and because it's 2023, and I wouldn't want to do it, until they could make something at least twice as powerful, and that's what I would expect. Something over double the the PS4 Pro was double the performance of the PS4, pretty much. Better architecture, faster clocks, double the compute units. Not as much more bandwidth, but Polaris is way more efficient with bandwidth than the rest of GCN, although certainly still starved by it. But AMD's doing way better now than they were back then. If they could double performance at the same price back then with what AMD was innovating at, and things are innovating faster, I'd expect something over twice as strong. So you're looking at something probably, I don't know, right? 3080, no, 4080 performance-ish, Which again, people are like, no way. And it's like, well, you all doubted that what I said about the PS5 and Xbox Series X's performance. It's not coming out this year, guys. It's coming out in probably over 3 years. Yeah, 3 years.
3 years.
2.5 years from now. This and I will also say that I actually think they'll charge $600 or more for it. I do. But I think they will. I think they'll want to make something over twice as strong, and that it will be actually more expensive, unlike the PS4 Pro that just slotted in at the same price. In terms of his actual, that's kind of a recap. In terms of his actual question about why do they think this changed when I always was told they didn't want to do this, I don't know. I just think, it's competition with Microsoft. Microsoft's definitely doing it, so Sony kind of has to.
Yeah, and I'm assuming they would be operating under that. Well, they might know already where their competitors are at internally, but you would think that they would be working on a design for this regardless of whether it ends up making it to market or not. It's a less than a year-old console right now. I mean, this is still pretty drawing board stages of its development, I would assume.
Yeah. It'd probably be finalized like next year or something. They can move a little faster here because it's not like it's like making up a new architecture entirely. Like they can just say, okay, now we know how good this is going to be. Let's lock it in. But yeah, anything I said about the PS5, just say for the Xbox Series X as well. Like they're very similar performance consoles. It's like, oh, so he says the PS.
You don't say that, Tom.
It's like, he's saying the PS5 Pro might be like RDNA 3 or RDNA 4 based. What about the Series X? I'm like, why would it be any different? I don't know. But I don't know anything specific outside of that, though. Azun Yan writes in, hello. In your discussion about Sony's current disadvantage against Microsoft and the services department, I don't think you mentioned Apple as potential partner to Sony. Is that improbable for those two companies to team up? Apple provides quite powerful hardware and robust platform for gaming, but Apple Arcade game selection is a joke. Tying it in with the PSN library, or at least a portion of it, would seem like a sensible move to promote iDevice as a game platform, which Apple seems to at least pretend it's trying to do at every presentation. There isn't that much hardware to optimize for, and the whole lot of extra accessories to sell, not to mention sweet subscription service. The only argument against, which comes to mind, is Apple not wanting anyone besides them to play it in their walled garden. In any case, we'll be curious to hear your thoughts. So, is he saying bringing like PlayStation stuff to Apple, or...
Yeah, I think so.
Because you could almost go, what about Apple designing the PS6?
I mean, I guess so. Depending on where Apple is, 5 years from now, I guess, maybe. I feel like they're going to stick with AMD for the foreseeable future unless something changes, though.
Yeah, I would think so, too, for backwards compatibility reasons alone. Yeah, in terms of we talked there's a really great conversation with Colin Moriarty about how, why it makes sense for Netflix and Sony to partner up and just, look for that. I'm sure it's out there. I think Apple, I think the iPhone just supports PlayStation controllers though, but I don't know. It's an interesting question. I almost feel like Apple just wants their own thing though. Yeah, so I don't see it as much as because Netflix allowing you to stream PS Now to their service makes sense. It's like, oh, now we're competing with what Amazon's doing with Prime Video. Hello, anyone noticing Prime Video is competing with Netflix and now they're adding a game streaming service? You would then go, oh, so Netflix's answer is to partner with Sony. And also Sony used to sell movies on the PlayStation Store, but all of a sudden they don't anymore. And Netflix maybe could benefit from that. So there's a lot of reasons Sony and Netflix would partner more so, I think, than Apple. But that's really all else I'll say. TikTok writes him, apologies for the dissertation, but what do you think... Dissertation, my mistake. Thank you, Dan. But what do you think of the pricing kerfuffle around the upcoming Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut? In case you don't know, which I don't really, the full price on PS5 is $70. The full price on PS4 for the Director's Cut is $60. If you own the original on PS4 or PS5, you can upgrade... Is this true? You can upgrade the PS5 version to the PS4 Director's for $20, so you can upgrade either version to the Director's Cut for the last gen for $20 or the next gen for $30. And if you buy the Director's Cut for PS4, you can later upgrade to PS5 for $10. I don't know. It just seems like they're kind of trying to cover all bases here. It says, considering Sucker Punch gave an incredible multiplayer to owners of the game for free, out of nowhere, now offered as a standalone for $20, this is likely Sony's mandate. Is the internet right to be mad, or is just pricing consistency in the face of generational growing pains? Thanks for your time. Well, I would just say it comes off as odd. I kind of see the whole cross-gen thing as semi-temporary, so it might be more worth it for these companies to focus on gamer goodwill than milking, but that's not the decision Sony's made with a lot of their stuff, it seems, but they continue to up-res, remaster, and try to charge for it. But at the same time, guys, games have never been cheaper, and $70 doesn't even account for the inflation we're going through right now. They just increased game prices for the first time in 2-3 generations, and now inflation hits again. And I've heard internally they're pissed at a lot of these companies, God dang it, inflation again. So really, even if we sell games for $70 new in a year, it's not even better than $60 a few years ago. These companies, the games have never been cheaper, and Sony and Nintendo, unlike Microsoft, actually need to make money when they make things. So that's all I can say in Sony's defense. I don't have much of an opinion. I would say if you bought, let me just put it this way. If you bought the original version on PS4, and then now it's $30 to get it in way better graphics with some redone assets with more DLC, I don't know that's that bad. They added a new island or something.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like they want to get that extra $10 if you have the PS5 version, and they want to make sure you can't game the system to not get it. To not have to pay it. Yeah,
so I don't have much else to add besides that. I actually think not enough people are pointing out how cheap gaming really is right now, as everyone complains about raising prices, that some of this is kind of just catching up with what's been going on anyways. But at the same time, it's I don't know. They could have made it a little less greedy looking, couldn't they have? Yeah. I don't know. Root Knight writes him, in the July loose ends, the topic of an Ampere SoC for a new 8K ready shield was brought up, which made me think of something. Wouldn't Nvidia be better off targeting TV manufacturers directly to get their Ampere SoC and high-end TVs? So he's some Orin variant, I assume. At the moment, the market is mostly occupied by MediaTek's SoCs, which make okay chips, I guess, for TVs, but significantly weaker than what Nvidia shipped with their Shield lineup. I mean, here's the thing, though. The top Orin chip, yeah, I mean, it looks like it's going to be as powerful as like a 3050. And I don't know, probably an i5 or something.
I feel like this is an idea we've touched on before, is TVs in the future just having chips in them that are capable of running games at like low settings instead of streaming taking everything over.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. So, having said that, Orin, I believe in its top configuration I read, uses like 65 watts. So I would go, a lot of these TVs don't want to use a lot of energy. Like, do you want to have a thick TV with a big loud fan on it, or at least require expensive cooling to not make it seem like it's using more energy than the other TVs? Because either one, something's got to give there. You got thermals to deal with. You know, I think that's a question. At the same time, my gut answer is actually yes, because of what you said, Dan. Just bundle it in and then like have like the GeForce Now. Say, you know, LG's new TVs, they aren't just good gaming TVs because of the low latency 4K 120 hertz, but guess what? They also just come with the ability to stream GeForce Now, and you can even natively run like the ARM version of Borderlands 2 and 3. Like, you can just play Borderlands natively on this thing, and it actually runs in 1080p. Like, I think that makes way more sense than trying to sell some separate Shield console or streaming itself. Just use this. Bundle a $100 console, because it's probably going to work as well as 1080p 30 frame streaming anyways, guys.
Yeah.
N writes in, "Hi, Tom. I don't know if you mentioned this before, but would it be feasible to have 3D cache on a Radeon 6000 series?" So if you're asking, will they put this in future Radeon cards, the answer is absolutely yes. And I think I leaked that first, the 512 megabyte thing at the end of the RDNA 3 Doom video. So look that up, guys. But in terms of our Radeon 6000, I don't think so. They always designed Zen 3 with the ability to use Vcache. They just weren't sure if it would work by Zen 4. And it does, but it's not crazy optimized for it. But there were always allotments in the Zen 3 design, the SoC, in case they got Vcache working so they could update it with a new generation, and they did. I don't believe Radeon 6000 or RDNA 2 has that. I don't think RDNA... Now, I think the Infinity Cache itself, was kind of a halfway point to them getting Vcache working. They're like, well, we kind of got this system working, but it's going to be monolithic. But yeah, so I think it's going to be in future GPUs. I don't think they can just add it to the current ones as a refresh. If I'm wrong, I'll say it, though. That would be interesting, but I don't think so. I really don't think so. Writes in, after Blue Box deleted all the tweets about the update in real-time experience, coincidentally, after he has a link to something there, do you think it is all a ruse by some internet funnyman? It doesn't really look like a very good scam to me if it's all a ruse. What are your thoughts now that it's unraveling before us? Well, frankly, I think the whole Blue Box thing is being talked about enough. I think it's obvious, but let's just say this, because we did make it kind of one of the main stories of one episode. Guys, I think something's going on. Sony's said nothing, and that's freaking weird, and it's gone on too long for it to not be something, in my opinion. If it's going to be worth it, I don't know. I really think they're kind of teasing a Silent Hills, which I leaked first, last year that was being revived. And they might even mention Metal Gear Solid, but I just, outside of that, there's nothing else to say.
Yeah, the Reddit post or people in the comments are suggesting that this could, which I'm not a Finnish law expert, but I would imagine that there's some way to negate the abuse of this system. There's apparently a lot of grants in Finland for startup companies if you can prove you're working on a project. So the idea is that this is a fake scam company, but once again, not a Finnish law expert, but I feel like they would have some way of telling if you're just abusing taxpayer dollars to keep a fake company alive for 6 years. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there would be something.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you pulled up this link, because that completely changes how I think about this question from I would say this. The fact that Sony said nothing publicly and gives them like the check mark on PlayStation Network, which even big names don't get that sometimes, makes me say this is unlikely. Because if these guys were just screwing around, Sony would come out and say, we don't know what this is.
I would say if Sony isn't to some degree involved, they're making not only are they, is Blue Box screwing people over, Sony is screwing a lot of people over by not having that said. And I know they're the company that invented the refrain, "We don't comment on rumors or speculation," but I don't even think they've said that at this point.
Nope, they did not say that. Or they probably have, actually. Someone there probably has to someone.
Sony should be publicly distancing themselves, like publicly distancing themselves from them if this isn't something.
I would agree.
And I guess that's not saying it couldn't be true, but it couldn't be true that this is some tax scam they're pulling off in Finland. But Sony is really fucking up if they haven't said anything yet, and that's true.
I completely agree. I think the most convincing part of the Blue Box conspiracy is how silent Sony is, and the fact that they clearly gave this Nothing Burger studio some kind of access to things. That's for sure the most convincing part of this, the conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Also, again, so I guess I think me and you are saying there has to be something to this conspiracy. If there's not, I'm going to be like, it's going to be one of those things where it's like, in hindsight, you kind of, though, still were a crazier person if you didn't believe it a little, because it's just so many coincidences. It's like, come on, But at the same time, we don't know if it'll be worth the payoff. We don't know what Silent Hills. Is it just a remaster of an old one? Is it a good remaster? Is it a new one revived by with Kojima working on it? That's what I leaked as possibly going on last year. But this is such a weird conspiracy that it's like, it better be like one showstopper reveal to be worth it at this point.
Yeah.
All right. We have one more. Shad Havar writes in and he says, I hope I said that right. Hey, Tom, I need a little help. I've been a follower of the channel since almost its inception, and when Broken Silicon 111 with Chris Ray came out, my persistence paid off big time. Since that episode, I've been going full bore with every spare moment I have to become a VFX artist. Yeah, this guy gave some incredibly good advice to aspiring VFX artists. He is a VFX artist that worked at Treyarch at Activision, worked on Call of Duty Cold War, and also is now working at Sony Santa Monica on some game that involves swords, I hear, and mythology. Of course, he can't confirm the game.
Wait, what could it be?
I don't know. Who knows what godly game could go to war in the market next year? Because technically they haven't even confirmed the name, I don't think, of the next God of War. But which is funny that he danced around the name for a while, and I realized it in a reader mail. Oh yeah, they haven't even confirmed the name, and that's why he's dancing around the name. But yeah, anyways, though, he still was able to talk more generally, and he gave some really good advice for becoming a VFX artist. And Shadavar continues, I'm learning Houdini effects via the apprentice version of the program. This is what I'm going to do with my life. I owe you both so much, but I need a little more help, if I may. I'd like to ask a few more questions and get Chris's opinion on certain online courses. I'm not afraid to pay money for the online video education I'm getting, but I just want to make sure by the end I'm the best I can be at this. It's not about the money. It's about the time spent. Is anything worth paying for? Because it'll save me time learning. Thanks for the show, Matt Meldrum. Well, thank you for supporting us, Matt. And I would say just, DM the question. You've wrote this reader mail, so you could put together, type it out ahead of time and post some of the questions in an abridged way into the reader mail channels on the Discord, which you get access to as a patron, or just DM me on Patreon, dude. I probably won't notice it right away, but I will within like a month, and then send it to him and get back to you or something. There's a lot of stuff in my mailboxes, so no promises on when I can get back. But if you hear this, I'm sure he would comment at least a little if I sent him something. All right, Dan, that is everything. I think this was a pretty fun episode. All the noticing all the questions and stuff built on each other as we kept going. I mean, what a coherent episode. which is very high praise.
Unlikely, uncommon for us, but we did
Hopefully not. But if you do think we're coherent most of the time, consider supporting us on Patreon. You know, you get access to Die Shrink, a Patreon exclusive podcast where you can, you can vote on the new Die Shrink episodes. We talk about all different types of things. We've got one coming out about Google Glass and that stuff. We did one on portable gaming. What's another one I have in there? I want to do one on the AM1 socket. There's another couple ones in there. I think they want us to do one on in Nintendo's business models, and like if we agree. I think that'd be a fun one to do eventually. And if you got the extra money, join us there. Again, you get early ad-free versions of Broken Silicon and other content as well. Yada yada yada. Go to the Patreon to see it. Otherwise, everyone, seriously, thanks for listening. Like these, share these, give us a review on Apple Podcasts. That helps a ton. We're starting to climb up the podcast rank charts again, Dan. By the way.
Hell yeah.
Which they're half manipulated, but still helps us get exposure, guys. So everyone go download every episode of Broken Silicon from the past month 100 times right now, please. I don't think I can legally ask you to do that. I don't know. I think it might be against their terms of service.
Yeah. No. Don't
do that. Not winking. But yeah, thank you to the people in the free feeds, of course. There's many ways you can help us besides, giving us money if you don't think it's worth it to do that or you don't have the money. And we appreciate all of you. Now let me stop rambling. Any last words, Dan?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels. Brad Medlin, Talos GUK, Benny Berlin, Justin Yant, Thomas Rupp, I Love You Lynn Jim, Ivan K, Tom Bailey, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Frederick Lau, Metrocore, Justin Parrish, Zachary Martin, Terrence Herod, Drita Full, Phil S, D31337 Antics, The Ninth Dude, Greg Renegar, Josh Law, JBG, Travis Gooding, The Mechanical Philosopher, Lebo King Kilo, Fatboy Diesru, Daniel Hyde, A Guy in PA 81, Nathan Mose, Coal Addict, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, Juan Garcia, Matthew Landavazo, My Name is Nobody, Johnson N, Alethros, Jensen Wang, Hey There's a Kitty, Greg Tiwanchik, Ivan214, John Jameson, Benjamin Cannon, Matthew Lane, Mark Raidmaker, Giant Rounder, Chris Licata, Michael McKee, Ali Robertson, Eric Jackson, Jonathan, Patrick Groh, Evan Dingle, Dominique Cox, Stefan, Original Ross, Tick Dickler, Joaquin Hagan, Total Silos, O'Connor, Michael Costa, Andrew S. Blake, Aaron Keith, Gregory S. Acker, Endless Loggins, Tom Sen, Filippo, Justice Brennan, Zutsu Taylor, Trevor Power, Stu Alenia, Nanyan, Daniel Nishpal, Franco Frederic, Dan Galanowski, Alex Carastillo, Dark Crane 2049, Lane Perry, Joseph Karaman, Brett Summers, Judd Y, Donovan Russell, Nicola Slicky, Martin Porshegi, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Ulam, Patrick J.S., Justin Staples, Freddie Canos Jr., Stephen Coates, Kiwi Phil, Dehuhu, Sarah Light, Anthony Gareffa, Brett Summers, Eddie Del Castillo, Joseph Loria, Luis Correa, Deke, Cheesy Ramen, Raul Ebeneni, Tim Robbins, Jake Dude 23, Brian Riggleman, Justin Gower, Caillou Mark Kelly, Dave McCoy, Valco Malev, Gabe Landner, Ronnie Khalik, Souza, Michael Deaton, Thomas Summers, Maurice Courtois, Wesley Sager, Scott Ref Schneider, Mai Sharona, Y. Trui, Roman, William W. Draper, Air Rats, Wakir Khan, Henry Zhang, Stephen Hart, Christopher A. Butler, Greg, Peter Moore, Amiable Chief, Justin Thomas, Sam Miller, Sammy Malas, Kevin Chen, Shakir, Nick Rakin, Holden Mobley, Matthew Lazier, R. Pete Sharma, Mead and Pork, Jimmy N.G., Mats, Garanadin, Benjamin Oshley, Z Jits, Shield TV, Kuto, Aaron, John Wisink, Sam Venzel, Mark Mitchell, Brucha, Jeremy So, James Anderson, Jess Awayak, Ian Clifford, Tyler Lindley, MJB1, Gordon Freeman, Michelle Pell, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.